All right, signing on. Official Loft Sports podcast here on the Loft Sports Podcasting Network. Tonight we got a little special episode here. We're going to be talking some NFL free agency. I got our guy Tom back on the pod. Tom, how's it going, brother?
It's doing good, man. It's the weekend. We might have some snow coming up here in New Jersey by the end of the weekend. So I'm enjoying the lack of snow for the little bit. It finally melted and it looks like we're getting more. So fun
Wow,
winter up here.
how much you guys supposed to get?
It's a toss up. I think it's gonna be somewhere between 6 and 12 inches,
Oh
hopefully
my
on the
God,
lower
dude.
side. Yeah, they're saying if this thing hits us the way that it could, we could be in for another big snowstorm. So
Dude,
we'll
I'm,
see.
I'm I'm so happy I don't live up there anymore. I don't have to deal with snow. I don't have to freaking dude. I
Yeah.
hate shoveling. I
Yep.
absolutely despise shoveling, dude. It's
I
the absolute worst.
I don't mind shoveling as a workout. I then hate how the snow just sits here for another 2 to 3 weeks, and
Oh,
it's
yeah, and then, of course,
miserable.
you gotta deal with ice and tough to
Yep.
drive and all that stuff. I just God. Very happy I don't have to deal with that anymore. Um, so yeah, folks, thanks for joining us. So tonight, like I said, we're gonna do a free agency preview. So we're gonna talk about, what positions do we foresee teams looking to fill in free agency, what players might be the best fit. So for tonight, I'm gonna handle the AFC teams. Tom's gonna handle the NFC teams. So we're gonna do 10 teams tonight. The plan is to do 10 teams on this episode. Next week we'll do another 10 teams. And then the week after, we'll do 12 teams to finish. And then after that weekend, that upcoming Monday is actually when NFL players can start speaking and negotiating with agents. So pretty good leadway time up until when NFL free agency actually begins. So for those of you who are watching on YouTube or our website, you can see I have a spin wheel up on the screen. And the teams we discuss tonight is going to be based upon which team the spinner lands on. So why don't we kick things off? We're going to start with the spinner, which is has every single team on it for the AFC and the NFC. We'll see what conference we start with here. So let's give it a spin, see where it lands. Big money, big money. It's like Wheel of Fortune. Let's see what we got, Tom. Looks like I'm going first here. We got,
You're on first.
how about this? Denver Broncos. So the number one seed in the AFC this year, the team that unfortunately fell short in the AFC Championship game, the Denver Broncos. So over this past year, let's give a little summary first on the Broncos. So this season, the Broncos finished with a 14-3 record, right? For number one seed in the AFC. They were 14th in points scored at 23.6 per game and third in points allowed with 18.3 per game. So Bo Nix, he was very efficient in his second season, and you got to give credit to their offensive line because Nix was the least sacked quarterback last season. Of course, this disaster struck, right? Nix and the Broncos when he suffered the season-ending ankle injury on the second to last play of the game against Buffalo in the divisional round. Denver, of course, won with Jarrett Stidham, the backup quarterback, in the title game against New England. Denver would lose that game 10-7. Now, the defense is really what carried Denver all year. Denver had the league's third-ranked scoring defense. They got all-pro performances from Zach Allen and Patrick Surtain II. Denver defense was number one in the league in the red zone. Only 42% of offense red zone trips led to touchdowns against them this year. They had two linemen, Garrett Bowles and Quinn Miners, they were named all pros. Running back R.J. Harvey led all rookies with 12 total touchdowns, contributed nearly 900 yards from scrimmage, and he took over the backfield from week 10 onward. So that's a little summary there. Let's talk about now the specific free agents and how Denver's looking as they approach free agency. Broncos have 21 players set to hit the market. They have about $25 million in projected cap space. So what the Broncos could do to open up some cap is Patrick Surtain could have his roster bonus converted into a signing bonus, and that could potentially save them about $8 to $10 million. There's also reports that Cortland Sutton could be traded or he could be a release candidate. That could potentially save them about $12 million in cap space. But let's get into who their actual free agents are this upcoming season. So Alex Singleton, linebacker, he totaled about 135 tackles this season, 1 sack, 4 passes defensed, and you may have heard that he was actually diagnosed with testicular cancer during the season. give him a lot of credit here. He only missed one game. And I will say this though about him: he is 32 years old as he's approaching free agency, getting a little up there in age. Another big free agent for them on the defense, John Franklin Myers, defensive lineman. Uh, the Broncos led the NFL in sacks this year with 68, and JFM contributed 7.5 of those, which was third on the team. So the Broncos originally acquired him from the New York Jets for a 7th-round pick. So fantastic value there. And as a Jets fan, yes, Joe Douglas was an awful general manager. J.K. Dobbins, another free agent for them. He was averaging 5 yards a carry before a foot injury ended his season. So I would expect him to hit free agency as Denver looks to use R.J. Harvey and probably find someone else to pair with him. And then I'm going to give a shout out to P.J. Locke here, who's a safety. He's mainly a special teams player, but he did play pretty well for them on the back end late in the season. And he was originally an undrafted free agent, so maybe they have a little extra incentive to keep him with the team. So those are their internal free agents. I want to just touch on the coaching philosophy too, and kind of then talk about what free agents might fit Denver, right? So, of course, Denver, they're coached by Sean Payton, and he has the full run of the offense there. So Denver, he runs a modernized version of the original West Coast offense, which is really based on timing and rhythm. The ball is meant to come out of the quarterback's hands quick to keep the offense on schedule and to reduce sacks. So he likes to use a lot of tight alignment. So, right, receivers close to the line of scrimmage to try to create free releases and open up some crossing routes, and to potentially help improve blocking angles in the run game. There were reports last year that Peyton actually tried to simplify the verbiage and the play calls to try to help Bo Nix out more to reduce potential errors in the play calling. So rumor is going into next year, Davis Webb will be calling the plays for the Broncos, as he was a popular name that popped up in head coaching searches and even for potential offensive coordinator jobs. So by giving him the run of the offense, they were able to keep him on the coaching staff and reward him with the offensive coordinator role. Defensively, so we've got Vance Joseph, uses an aggressive attack first system. He likes to use simulated pressures. You'll probably hear that a lot tonight. A lot of defensive guys in the league now are into the simulated pressure. So when I say simulated pressures, I'm talking about like lining up 6 or 7 guys at the line of scrimmage to kind of confuse the offensive line's protection and the calls, and then dropping a few guys back into coverage and only rushing 4. So Denver was known during the season to be flexible when it came to their blitzing. There was a lot of games where they blitzed like 60%, and then there were some games where they only blitzed like 10%. So they technically run a 3-4 defense. It's like a multiple scheme. And usually looks like a 5-man front. Denver usually likes to bring a safety down into the box as a kind of like a pseudo linebacker. And due to the great coverage ability of PS2, Denver likes to play man coverage, as Vance Joseph isn't afraid to leave his corners out on islands. I want to talk about some free agents now who would really fit in with Denver. One of the guys who I really like for them would be, a weapon here for Bo Nix and Wan'Dale Robinson. He can be a high volume slot specialist who can, he can win over the middle of the field. He actually led the league in slot targets and catches in 2025, and he could potentially be a reliable safety blanket for Bo Nix. He could get a pretty good contract after the year he had. He could get a contract of about $10 million or so more after the season he just had. So that's an offensive free agent for them. Defensively, if they're looking for someone maybe to replace Alex Singleton due to his age, Nakobe Dean is a guy who could play a role here. He's an aggressive downhill linebacker. His blitzing ability makes him a good fit in this defense, and for Joseph's different 3-4 looks that he shows. So, Denver defense. I think if they just replace Singleton with a guy like Dean, I think that would be a seamless transition there, and getting Bo Nix some more weapons on offense would definitely bring out more into making Nix a more higher echelon quarterback. Tom, anything you want to talk about Denver, or you want to move on?
No, I'll add something here with Denver. They're an interesting case, right? Because if Bo Nix doesn't get hurt, this team's probably in the Super Bowl.
Oh yeah,
I think after watching that game against the Pats, and the weather played a factor in it. So who knows how Knicks would have played in that weather. But I think when you watch that game and you look at, Denver and the quarterback situation for that game, if Knicks plays that game, they're probably in the Super Bowl. So when I look at this team, you don't wanna change too much in what they have. I definitely agree with you in the standpoint of this team needs more options on offense. Sounds like Courtland Sutton's time is done. He's like, again, today's modern athlete, like he's posting stuff online and he's like being cryptic with what his future is. Whether he's there or not, I think this team needs to find a way to get a true number one wide receiver. They have money. I don't know how much money they have, or how much they're going to create and open up and guys they want to keep. I know you mentioned Wandell Robinson. I think if they can keep Cortland Sutton, a Wandell Robinson, or a Rashid Shaheed, somebody like that who can complement him works. If it's not Wandell Robinson, and if you're getting rid of Cortland Sutton, then I think this should be a team that is really looking to swing big on a number one wide receiver.
Mhm.
Whether that's trying to get like a Garrett Wilson from the Jets, I don't know if they
Dude,
can
what you
afford.
doing to me, man?
I'm
Don't put
just,
that in
I'm
the
just,
atmosphere.
I'm just throwing something out there. I don't think that they can afford to pay George Pickens what he'll want, but like, could they call him? When we talk about the Eagles, we'll talk about the AJ Brown
Mhm,
situation. Like, those are big contracts, but that's where they should be looking and the type of player they should be swinging for in terms of wide receiver. I think they could use another running back. You
mhm,
mentioned RJ Harvey. They're happy with him, but can they find a guy similar to what Dobbins would be to complement him? I know they like J.K. Dobbins and he got hurt, but is there a guy out there, whether via draft or whether it's somebody they look to sign in free agency, especially running backs? Like that's a position that you don't have to spend a lot of money on, and there's some quality free agent guys like a Travis Etienne could fit in on this football team and not cost you a lot, give
mhm.
you something a little bit different than Harvey. Tight end is a position that I think they could look to add. Evan Ingram was good for them, but not great. So could they upgrade that tight end position? And then again on defense, and you're going to hear us talk about who they keep and who they don't keep. I think linebacker becomes a need for this football team if they don't retain Alex Singleton. I think if they can retain Alex Singleton, they'll be comfortable there. Um, and John Franklin Myers is a free agent.
Yes,
I
he
I
is.
I don't think they're going to be able to retain him again. They have like what was the number you said
25
they have?
mil. They have 25 million in cap space, but they could, if they restructured PS2's contract,
Oh,
that could
they
open up like another 10 million or so.
and again, you're gonna hear us talk about on this podcast, like converting, especially when I start talking about it, I'm gonna be talking about converting salary to signing bonus, and that can create a lot of money. And when I get to teams and talk about it, we'll talk about the risk in it. But the Broncos have a number of players that they can restructure and kick money down the road if they so choose. So they could be a player in free agency. I don't think they will be. I think they'll try to fill needs, and if there's a player that fits what they're trying to do, and they have to spend a little bit on him, I think they'll look to do it there. But really, it's the offensive side of the football. I think if they
Mhm,
can add a wide receiver, ideally, I think they're looking for a true number one. If you keep Sutton and you feel he's a one, then you're looking for a complementary player, maybe a tight end that can help you a little bit in the passing game as well, and then a different style of running back. At least then you're giving Bo Nix everything he needs so that when you run it back next year, your defense is going to be just as good. It should on paper. And now it's, can the offense score a little bit? Can we get the offense into the mid to high 20s next year, scoring consistently? And if they can do that, I think we're talking about a team that's back in Super Bowl contention next year.
yeah, and like we talked about the running back, I mean, they could potentially bring back J.K. Dobbins. He might not cost that much coming off the injury, so they definitely could look to bring him back in a more, RB2 role to Harvey. Definitely something that they can look into. But yeah, agreed. Running back will definitely be another need for them to pair with Harvey.
And I think they like Dobbins too. Like that could just be one of those, to your point. Like I use Spot Track a lot just to look at their market value, and I don't always think it's the most accurate. Like they have him valued at $2.5 million. I think you could get a little bit more of that, but for a guy who has been in and around your football team for however many years now, I'm sure they'd like to retain him and utilize him with Harvey. And if not, running back's one of those positions that whether they look for maybe a Jadarian Price at the back end of the first round or see who's there in the second or third round,
Mhm,
or you go after a guy like Travis Etienne that can catch the ball out of the backfield a little bit, add a different dimension.
mhm.
Um, I think there are options there for them, but I just think when you look at this team, it's a lot of offensive side of the football.
Agreed. Yeah, they definitely need to upgrade that offense around Bo Nix. All right, it's Denver. So what I'm going to do now? Let's go to the NFC wheel only. and let's see who we land on here. Big money, big money. Wheel of Fortune, baby. Who we got? We got. Uh-oh. Is it the boys? Is it your
Oh,
boys?
man.
Here we go.
I don't even have to pull well, I don't even need to pull anything up for this team, huh? All right, Dallas Cowboys. We'll get into the Cowboys very quickly. Let me just pull something up here on my end. The Dallas Cowboys. This was, to me, as a Cowboy fan, a disappointing season. Probably not an unrealistic season for what my expectations were. Um, the Cowboys are, to me, and have been caught in this area of, do they go all in? Do they not go all in? Do they make moves? You hear their owner slash general manager slash whatever other title he grants himself consistently throw verbiage out there that makes you think they're going to go for it. This team on paper this year, at least on the defensive side of the football, was never good enough that I thought they would be anything better than a 500 football team. They were historically one of the worst defenses in football. They could not get themselves off the field. Offensively, they were really good, but defensively, they could not stop anybody. This is a team that continued to struggle on the road. It's been a problem they've had for a really long time. And again, when you look at this team and you look at their schedule this year and you look at their losses, they lost to a lot of playoff teams. They did not beat a lot of teams with winning records or teams that made the playoffs. I think just looking at it now as I'm talking to you, the only team they beat that made the playoffs last year were the Eagles.
Hmm.
And they had that little stretch. They traded for Quentin Williams last year, and they had that stretch where they beat the Eagles and they beat the Chiefs. And I think everybody was starting to buy in on this football team. But at the end of the day, I don't think there was enough talent on this team to be anything better than a 7-9 roster. Now, with that said, the move of Quentin Williams was an outstanding move for Dallas, and we can talk about how much or how little they overpaid for it. But adding Quentin Williams gave them a bona fide all-pro, all-stud, top 5 player in his position, and you could see a difference on the defense when they added Williams to the defense. This team's offseason focus is going to be on the defensive side of football.
Mhm.
There aren't a couple sneaky needs on offense, which I'll talk about in a minute, but this team needs to add talent on defense. If this team can be an average defensive team next year, middle of the pack, top 15 to top 20, they could have a chance to make the playoffs and contend potentially if the offense stays as good as it was.
Mhm.
But there are some moving pieces that we'll talk about, and we'll get into that now. So the Cowboys cap situation, quite simply, they're over the salary cap. They are going to move around a lot of money. This is what the Cowboys do. Dak Prescott currently holds a $74 million cap hit for the 2026 season. They are going to restructure that money. They're going to convert that salary to a bonus, which basically means they take that money and they kick it down the road. A lot of teams do this, the Cowboys being one of the ones who do it a lot. It's great if you think your player is going to be on the team for the 3 or 4 years you extend that money. In Dak's case, I think he's going to be on the team. The frustrating part in moving that money is the Cowboys did have a pretty good out in that contract in a year or two that they now kind of really make it difficult to get out of that contract. I don't think Dallas cares about that because I think they think they have their quarterback.
Mhm.
So they're going to move that Dak money. They've CeeDee Lamb. They're going to convert his money to a bonus. They're going to free up money that way. Tyler Smith and Deron Bland, they're going to do that too. All in all, the Cowboys can open up I don't want to say a lot. They can open up a lot of money. I don't think they're going to because they're not traditionally super aggressive in free agency, but they can restructure those contracts. And then we'll kind of get into like the what would you do with players. Logan Wilson, they cut today. So he was on the list. They waived him today. They free up $6.5 million doing that. I think there's a world where Kenny Clark gets cut between now and March 13th when the new season starts. They'd free up $21.5 million if they trade him or cut him. I think they have to do it. They traded him for Micah Parsons. I'm not even going to get into that deal because I could talk about that for an hour on my frustrations in that deal. But I think there's a world where they cut Kenny Clark and then they look to bring him back on a cheaper deal. And I think there's a player like Solomon Thomas who's good for Dallas, who just won't fit in with what they're doing. They have more than enough defensive tackles. They actually have a lot of money invested in defensive tackle. I mean, even with Christian Parker coming in, and I should mention that the Cowboys did let go of Matt Eberflus, who was their defensive coordinator last year, and they've brought in Christian Parker. He's talked about playing a 3-4 on paper. it's going to look like a 4-3. It's going to look like a 3-4. There are going to be a lot of guys moving around. I think there could be a world where they want to keep Solomon Thomas, but if they wanted to move on from him, they could cut him and free up $2.5 million. The other way Dallas can kind of open up some money is, well, for one, Brennan Aubrey is going to be a free agent. I'll talk about that in a second. They can extend him. I do wonder if the Cowboys look to extend Quentin Williams. He has a pretty big cap hit the next 2 years. He's 28 years old. He's still a top player. Extend him to maybe a 3-4 more year deal and kind of kick that money a little further back and lower that cap hit over the next 2 years. Dallas can do that if they want. Dallas doesn't have a lot of free agents they need to re-sign, and I'm going to talk about those guys in a second, but this is a team that could be aggressive when it comes to free agents or even trading. So before we get into that, I'll just touch on their free agents. Brendan Aubrey's a free agent. He's a restricted free agent. He's one of the top kickers in football. I think Dallas is going to look to re-sign him. I think they'll come to a deal. I think there's a world where they put one of those transition tags on him, or they tender him and they put a second-round tag on him, and they see if a team is willing to pay that money, and then maybe they take the second-round pick and try and find another kicker. I think that could happen, but I think in all likelihood the Cowboys re-sign Brendan Aubrey. Then there's George Pickens, and he's going to be the topic of conversation when it comes to Dallas. They gave up a third-round pick in 26. Fifth-round pick in 27. They knew he was in a contract year, and he played unbelievable for the Cowboys. He had over 1,400 yards receiving, had 9 touchdowns in 17 games. Dallas is, I don't know if they've officially franchised him, but they're going to franchise him. And the question becomes, will they extend him? Is there an offer out there that would move the Cowboys to deal him? I think if Dallas could get a first-round pick for George Pickens, I think they'd trade him. His agent is the same agent as Michael Parsons. Does that play a factor into this at all? They have a working relationship, but I'm sure it's not great after the Michael Parsons stuff from last season.
Yeah.
George Pickens is going to want to get paid. Spot Track has him valued at $35.5 million. I think he gets more than that. And if you believe stuff you read, his agent and him are throwing around 35 to 40 million. If that's the case, I just can't see Dallas paying that.
No way.
For as good as he was, they already have CeeDee Lamb on a massive contract around that price. I don't have what CeeDee's making in front of me, but he's making good money. So keep an eye on George Pickens. Dante Fowler, they brought him in. He underachieved in Dallas. He'll likely leave as a free agent. Javonte Williams was really good for Dallas this year. He rushed for 1,200 yards, had 11 touchdowns in 16 games. They signed him on a pretty cheap deal. Spotrac has him valued at $7.2 million. I don't think Dallas would want to pay that, especially when you look at Dallas's last 3 running backs, Tony Pollard, Rico Dowdle, Javonte Williams. Now, Dowdle has gone on to have a really good season with Carolina. I'll talk about him whenever Carolina gets spun on the wheel. And Pollard's been serviceable in Tennessee. I don't think it's necessarily a product of Dallas's offensive line, but I think it's a factor. And I think if Javonte Williams wants that type of money, $7 million, I think Dallas tells him, go get it in the open market. I think if there's a deal where they can sign Javonte Williams to a deal that works for them and Williams, I think they'd like to retain him. The last name that I'm going to bring up here is Jadeveon Clowney. They signed him in September. He was one of their most productive pass rushers. The question is whether he'd want to come back to Dallas or not. They signed him on a cheap deal. Spotrac has him valued at $5.3 million. I think he's going to get more than that. He had 8.5 sacks this year for Dallas. Now, that number's a little inflated because he had like 3.5 against the Giants late in the year, but he was still really productive. And as a Cowboy fan, I would be willing to bring him back if the money was right. And this is a team that, as I go into needs, they need pass rushing help. The only other names I'll throw out there are Kenneth Murray, a linebacker, Sam Williams, who they drafted, who was a second-round pick, Jalen Tolbert, they drafted as a wide receiver, Jack Sanborn, they signed last year. I think if the money's right for some of these guys, they'd retain them. But, in terms of Williams and Tolbert, they've disappointed. Sanborn and Murray weren't really productive for the Cowboys this year. So those are their free agents. Now the Cowboys' needs. I mean, when you look at this team, it's the defensive side of the football. Their defensive end, they need a pass rusher, they need linebackers, they need corners, they need safeties. I do think this team is going to be active in free agency. And what I mean by that is traditionally Dallas sits free agency out and they try to get the bargain free agent guys, which have worked for them in some cases with guys like Ron Kearse or Malik Hooker who have come in on cheaper deals and then they'll draft. If this team wants to seriously compete next year, they need to go out and sign guys now. So I don't know where they're gonna shop in terms of defense. When you look at edge, Trey Hendrickson's the name that's been thrown out a lot. His market value is 25 million on Spot Track. I think Dallas would look to potentially pay him something like that. I read something today where that number might be around 30 something. I don't think Dallas pays him that type of money. They've been mentioned for Max Crosby. If Dallas has to give up one of their ones, I don't know if they're willing to do that. But Max Crosby's a name that's been thrown out for Dallas as well. If
I think
it's not
the Raiders, I think, didn't they just come out? I think they said they wanted 2 first rounders for him and a player. I think I
if
read
if
that.
if that's what they're asking for, he will not be a Dallas Cowboy.
Yeah.
Now, at the same time, I don't know if the Raiders will get that from anybody.
Right.
So I sit here and go, yeah, they can ask for that. That price might come down around the draft. When I look at defensive hedge guys in free agency, none of them really moved me. You know, you have a guy like Leonard Floyd who was all right in Atlanta. Maybe Joey Bosa, if you believe he can be something. Um, you know, you have Oweh from the Chargers, Khalil Mack, Jalen Phillips is a name that's been rumored with Dallas, Bradley Chubb. Maybe they look to get an edge guy like that. Linebacker, I think, is a similar position. I think in an ideal world, Dallas wants a linebacker that's going to help in coverage. They have DeMarvion Overshown, who's played really well. So that leads me to a guy like Devin Bush, who played well in Cleveland, but at the same time, you know, hasn't always been the most sturdy guy as a coverage guy. You know, Quay Walker's name has been mentioned, not the best cover guy. But then you also have to look at guys who Christian Parker's had previous relationships with, and that could be Alex Singleton or Nakobe Dean. Neither of those guys moved me a ton, but, you know, those are names that have been mentioned. Corner, I don't think will be a free agency need. Dallas has 3 corners, or at least 2 that I think they're really comfortable in. In Siobhan Revel, who they drafted last year from East Carolina, he's coming off of a torn ACL. He did play last year, but usually that torn ACL recovery takes a full year before you see the best of them. They have Deron Bland, who they paid. So yeah, they cut Trayvon Diggs. They have Carson, who they I think he was an undrafted free agent. They might have drafted him as a day 3 pick, but they were high on him 2 years ago. I think corner's a spot they'll look to add in the draft, and I think safety's a similar position. I think overall, what Dallas does in free agency is try to shore themselves up so that when the draft comes, they don't feel they need to draft for need. So if pick 12 comes up and Sonny Styles or Caleb Downs are there, they feel comfortable taking those guys, and they don't have guys that are blocking a trajectory for them to play right away. I think the same could go for end, whether it's David Bailey or Ruben Maine, or if there's a world where Arvell Reese makes it to them there. The only other position I'd mention is, you know, wide receiver will come a need if this team doesn't re-sign George Pickens or trades George Pickens and doesn't extend him. And running back will become a need if they don't if they don't re-sign Javonte Williams. I think even with Javonte Williams, I'd like to add another running back, but Malik Davis played well last year. They still have Jaden Blue, who they drafted from Texas, who struggled at times, but looked good in the last game of the year. I think tackle's a sneaky need for this football team. Terrence Steele's been with this team for a while. They drafted Tyler Guyton 2 years ago. Both have really struggled to be really good tackles. They moved Tyler Smith out there at the end of last year. I don't love that move, but if you move Tyler Smith out to tackle, I think you still need a tackle. So I wouldn't be shocked if tackle is a spot that maybe they quietly look to explore to provide some competition for next year.
Yeah, I agree. I think definitely a defensive side of the ball. Did I hear that right? Did even Clowney had 8 sacks last year?
He had 8.5 sacks, but
Wow.
but
That has to
again,
be the most he's ever had, right?
3.5. I mean, while I'm saying this right now, I'll look it up.
Yeah. No, but I mean, yeah, but he, yeah, because that's got to be the most I think he's ever had. Because he's not. I mean, right? He was dominant at in South Carolina, but he was never really much of a pass rush guy in the NFL.
And this has kind of been Clowney's trajectory, right? He had 9.5 one of his years in Houston, and then he had 9.5 his 1 year in Baltimore, and then he hits free agency because he signed a 1-year deal with Baltimore after his 2 years in Cleveland, and then he goes to Carolina. And he's all right in Carolina. He had 5.5 sacks in 14 games, but for the price tag he was on, I think it was around $8 million. Something like that. Carolina was like, we're not bringing you back. You know, he takes kind of the preseason off, signs with Dallas in September, and he had 8.5 sacks in what was it, 13 games? Yeah, in 13 games. But again, or excuse me, 2.5 of those came against the Giants in the last game of the year. He had 2 against Washington, so he had 4.5 sacks in his last 2 games. But he showed flashes. So like there is a world where Yeah, he's 33, just turned 33. There's a world where maybe the Cowboys aren't interested in bringing him back, but I think for the right price, it's again, it's a low risk reward for a team that really struggled to get to the quarterback this year.
Mhm. Yeah, and I feel like over the past couple of years, he's Jadeveon Clowney has kind of been like that 1 year mercenary. He'll take, he'll just go to a team. He'll play solid, maybe not have the most amount of sacks on the team or anything like that, but he'll have a solid year. He'll hit free agency again, sign with some team towards the end of camp, and he'll come out ready to play during the
Yeah.
season. But yeah, I agree 100%. Looking at if you look at the Dallas Cowboys on paper, you see names like Donovan Ezeraku, Quinnen Williams, Kenny Clark. Those are some big names there, but you definitely need more help on the pass rush side of the ball there, especially as you mentioned, Kenny Clark could be a cap casualty this year. We'll see what the Cowboys decide to do with that. And I think, looking at research that I did on this team, I do think likely this will be one of their first round picks will be used to help out that pass rush. Yeah, linebacker, you mentioned Demarion Overshown, really like him too. But I agree. I think he needs a running mate there, someone who can operate as a true Mike middle linebacker on their team. And then, yeah, speaking of the secondary, Deron Bland, he had a couple foot surgeries though, right? He's been banged up past couple years, so they definitely could use some young players there and add some more playmakers to that secondary. You mentioned, actually, I had it right here. Free agent fit. Devin Bush is a guy, right? He had a breakout season with Cleveland last year, 125 tackles, 3 picks. He was kind of like looked upon as like a number one draft pick bust a couple of years when the Steelers drafted him. But he had a really good year with the Browns. He's a guy who can drop back into coverage. He showed that he's a good run stopper. You just got to hope it wasn't like a 1 year wonder sort of with him if you're going to commit big money to him. And then, like you mentioned, Christian Parker's connection to the Eagles, right? Nakobe Dean, maybe even a Reed Blankenship at
Yeah.
safety.
Yep. That's
Yep.
another name.
Yeah, so definitely, yeah, I agree. Cowboys' defensive side of the ball definitely will be the main focus for them this upcoming season, unless something changes with George Pickens if he gets moved.
And I think what this team and maybe if Hendrickson is available, I could see Dallas spending big on them. I do think Dallas will spend some money in free agency this year. I just think it's going to be middle of the pack guys instead of waiting for that third tier of free agent. I think the Cowboys will sit out that first tier of free agent, and then when that second tier comes along, to your point, like a Reed Blankenship, maybe Devin Bush, I could see him getting involved with Alante Taylor from the Saints,
Mhm.
Dean. I think they might be priced out for him, but he was
Yeah.
really good.
Hmm.
Maybe going after guys like that. Greg Newsome, I think, could
Hmm.
be a guy. Tyreek Woolen, who's physical,
Yep.
really good coverage corner. Josh
I had
Jobe.
him here too, Tariq Woolen. Yeah, he's a big corner, real physical player.
Yeah.
And yeah, he could be one of the cheaper options on the market.
And again, like you add guys like that, and then it gives you flexibility that, hey, if the draft falls your way and you draft Monsieur Delane, okay, then you run it with Delane, Bland, whoever, Tyreek Woolen, and Siobhan Revel. And with Christian Parker, he'll find a way to get one of these guys to play safety, or help somebody play in the box or high safety, or he'll find ways to get good defensive backs on the field. I just think this year, and for a team that usually doesn't, they're not active in free agency. I don't want to say they're going to spend in free agency, because then people are going to be like, well, they're going to spend a lot of money. I just think they're going to be a little bit more active. And if they're not, then it's the same old story for this team. It's the owner and it's the GM feeding you the stuff you want to hear, and then they're just not serious about winning. So
Hmm.
it is a big offseason for Dallas, and I'm curious to see how they attack it.
Hmm. All right, great breakdown on the Cowboys. All right, so let's go to the AFC wheel for our third team. Let's see what we end up with. Let's see. Ooh, looks like the Jaguars. Jaguars Chiefs. Who's this? Jaguars? Jacksonville Jaguars. Jaguars, of course, had a big turnaround season this year. So, right, 2025. So, Jaguars hired Liam Cohen, coming over from Tampa Bay. He was the offensive coordinator. Jacksonville, really remarkable turnaround this year, going 13-4, which was actually the most wins they've had since the 1999 season. And they also won the AFC South this year. One point in the year, Jaguars were 5-4, and then all of a sudden, boom, they reel off 8 straight wins, entering the playoffs as one of the hottest teams in the league. And of course, their downfall coming against Buffalo wild card weekend by the score of 27-24. Trevor Lawrence showed a lot of growth this season under Cohen. He set a franchise record with 38 touchdowns this year, 29 passing and 9 rushing. He was also one of the finalists for the NFL MVP. Travis Etienne, who we mentioned a little earlier, ran for over 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns. Parker Washington, breakout wide receiver this year. He was originally a sixth round pick, and in 2023, sixth round pick, and he finished this year as the team's leading wide receiver. Played a major role on special teams, even returned a few punts for touchdowns. Defensively, Anthony Campanile, the defensive coordinator, Tom Bergen County guy here. Did you know that he's from actually from Fair Lawn, New Jersey?
Yeah,
He
he's,
became a
g
yeah, dude. It's pretty
the
funny
whole
local
the
guy
whole
here.
yeah, him and the family has coached, parochial football, which is like Catholic school football up here, for years. There's a bunch of them, and they've all had great success up here, especially in the high school ranks.
Yeah, man. Yeah, he really turned around the Jacksonville defense this year. You know, defensively, they became a bunch of ball hawks, 31 takeaways this year after previously only having 9 the year before. So, they actually led the league with 110 points off turnovers. They were tops in the league in rush defense, and they didn't allow a single player to rush for more than 75 yards during the season. Under Campanile, Devin Lloyd was a second team All Pro. Josh Hines Allen ranked second in the AFC in QB pressures. Antonio Johnson was like the breakout star of the defensive unit. He tied Lloyd with 5 interceptions. Even Devon Hamilton, who played the nose tackle, was regarded as the primary reason why the run defense was so damn good this year. Let's get into their free agents. So the Jaguars currently project to be over the cap right now at 11.4 million, and they have a couple major players hitting free agency. So they're going to need to really try to rework some contracts here in order to keep potentially both of them, couple of guys here. So let's get into Devin Lloyd first, right? So the Jaguars originally had declined his 5th-year option going into the season, and he responded with an all-pro season. So he said he's on record saying he'd like to stay, but as of the show's recording here, there haven't been any contract talks. None of that has taken place. So the franchise tag for linebackers is $28 million for 1 year. So it feels like a long-term extension here is probably the only path to keeping him. Now, speaking of the franchise tag, another guy they could use the tag on is Travis Etienne. He ran for over 1,100 yards, as I mentioned this year. The franchise tag for running backs is expected to be about in the 12 to $14 million range. The transition tag is about 12 million. The Jaguars, I think, right, what they'll probably want to do is maybe tag ETN, maybe while working on a long-term extension for Devin Lloyd. I think that's probably the best way to go about that. Big free agent Greg Newsome, cornerback. He was acquired midseason in a trade from the Browns. He was really given a lot of credit for tying together the Jaguars secondary over the second half of the season. He dealt with some injuries during the season, but he played in every game, so he was fighting through the ailments. And then another big free agent for them, Andrew Wingard here, one of their safeties. He recorded 84 tackles this past season, defending 9 passes and had 1 interception. So let's talk about kind of the coaches in general here. So Liam Cohen, who's the head coach and calls the offensive plays, he comes from the Sean McVay coaching tree. He emphasizes like a pro-style hybrid approach, which is basically simplifying decisions for quarterbacks and trying to maximize individual skill sets of the playmakers. He likes a physical running game to set the stage for explosive plays downfield. You know, the Jaguars' offense relies heavily on like pre-snap motion, shifting formations, which is right designed to create mismatches for the playmakers, for the receivers and tight ends. And he likes to use spread formations to pull defenders out of the box to open up lanes for the ground game. The offensive coordinator is Grant Udinsky, who's actually the youngest offensive coordinator in the league. He just turned 30 years old, and he was, for a long point, he was looked at as potentially the next head coach of the Cleveland Browns before he withdrew from the search. Defensively, Anthony Campanile, he likes to use a lot of multiple fronts, often utilizing a 4-3 front with 3-4 space. And so the unpredictability allows the Jaguars to pivot from like heavy zone schemes to aggressive man coverage. So I mean, basically his scheme has been described as kind of a hybrid of Vic Fangio's with the two high safety shells and a combination of Fangio's and Brian Flores's, the DC at Minnesota for unpredictable blitzes and simulated pressure. So Campanile's kind of like a combination of both of them. So as far as free agent fits go, it's going to be really tough. I mean, they have to prioritize Devin Lloyd and Travis Etienne, in my opinion. But some of their fits, if they can afford it, Jamel Dean, as you mentioned earlier, he's one of the premier man coverage cornerbacks in the league. He actually allowed a league low 46.9 passer rating last season when he was targeted. he's a guy who has the ability to disrupt receivers at the line of scrimmage, which Campanile really likes for his corners to do. Likes to play a lot of press coverage. So if they move on from Greg Newsome, if they have the cap space, maybe Jamel Dean could be a replacement there. Another guy on there that I have for offense, a guy like Jawan Jennings, who's a free agent for the 49ers. He would fit Cohen's scheme really well. He's very physical. He's a good blocking receiver, was really reliable for the 49ers on third down conversions. Unfortunately, like I said, for the Jaguars, it's going to be really tough for them to maneuver within their constraints of their budget. So, but we'll see. We'll see if they make any restructures to be able to get them cap compliant once the new league year opens.
And the Jags can free up some space. I think to the point that you just talked about, the big issue for this football team is going to be the fact that they're going to want to keep Devin Lloyd.
Yeah.
That's one. If they want to keep ETN, that's two. I mean, Spottrack's value on these guys, Lloyd's is about 20 million.
Mhm.
I think that sounds about right, right?
I
Like
think so. Yeah,
he
definitely.
played that well, even if it's 1 year. The other thing to keep an eye on is, Montrek Brown and Greg Newsome were their two starting corners this year, I believe. And both of them are free agents.
Mhm.
Jordan Lewis played there as well. I th- I believe I've read, and you may know this better than me. I think they're going to prioritize Travis Hunter playing on the defensive side of the
They
football.
are. Yes,
So
they said that.
so I assume they'll let one of those two guys, maybe both of them, walk. They still have Jordan Lewis. Jaron Jones played a little bit. They can create money,
Mhm.
whether it's Eric Armstead or Travion Walker. They can move money around to create money. I just don't know how aggressive they'll be in free agency. I think if they can be aggressive in free agency, I think they need to look towards this offensive line. I know they're comfortable with their tackles, but the interior of this line has to get a little bit better. The interior of their defensive line, I think, can improve a little bit as well. And so those might be areas, but it's really tough for me to look at where this team might go, especially when I look at, guards. The guard market isn't great. It's probably a little overpriced, and
A lot of
some of
older
these guys,
guys. A lot of
hey,
older guys on that
you
market, yeah.
just took the words out of my mouth,
Mhm.
Finn. A lot of dudes who are going to be a little bit older that, who knows, maybe Jacksonville looks at them and goes, okay, for a year or two, we'll fill you in, and then we can go from there. But I think guard, I think defensive tackle, the interior, and then again, depending on what they do with their free agents. If they can't sign Devin Lloyd, they're going to need to sign or draft a linebacker. That's going to be a position that they need to fill. And potentially cornerback too, depending on how comfortable they feel with Travis Hunter there. I think overall with this Jacksonville team, the thing that you have to feel most comfortable about is you feel good about your quarterback now. And you feel good about your quarterback with not really having the best options. Brenton Strange finished the year really well for this football team. I know they traded for Jacoby Myers and they extended him, and they're happy with him. They're happy with Parker Washington. Brian Thomas Jr., what do they do with him? I know he's still on the rookie deal. Do they hang on to him? Do they try to flip him? Can you flip him and get something for him? He finished the year pretty well. I think he had like 700 yards, but not very productive in the red zones.
I think teams will definitely be interested in Brian Thomas Jr. He had a pretty good rookie year, and then I
Yep,
don't
I
know,
agree.
he just kind of fell out of Cohen's favor, it seemed like.
I think if you trade Brian Thomas Jr., then wide receiver becomes a need. Not a need, but one of those positions where, hey, can we add somebody? Whether it's probably not through free agency, that'd probably be somebody via the draft. But can we add somebody to help, our young quarterback? But for me, can we beef the interior of our offensive line? Can we get better at defensive tackle? And then can we retain our own? Can we retain one of those two corners? Then we can slot Travis Hunter in for another. And then again, Devin Lloyd, you feel you have to, and it's one of those. We'll talk about 50-year options with other players over the next 3 weeks with multiple teams. This was a team that took a risk, and it kind of backfired on them a little bit.
Yeah, agreed. And let's not forget, too, the Jaguars actually don't have a first-round pick in this draft. They traded it as part of the Travis Hunter deal to the Cleveland Browns, so that's one less asset they'll have
What
to
do
try
you
to.
know what number that is?
I want to say it's like 24, something like that. I think it was 24, but you'd have to
Yeah,
look it up.
I'm gonna Google that while we're sitting here.
Mhm.
Yeah, we'll be in the 20s because they were a playoff team.
Yeah. While you
Um,
look into it, I'll spin the wheel for
yeah,
getting the
spin the
NFC
wheel.
team ready. So we're gonna switch now to the NFC for Tom's second NFC team. Yeah, I want to say it was 24, 25, one of those. Actually, you know what? It's 24, 26 because I had it last week when we did the draft.
Yep, it's 24. You're right.
24. We got
Ooh, the Tampa Bay Bucks.
Los Buccos.
All righty, let me just get all my Bucks stuff up here. The Tampa Bay Bucks. Okay, the Bucks, basically their season summary. An up and down season for this football team. Through the first half of the year, you could argue that this team looked like not just one of the better teams in the NFC, but a Super Bowl contender, and they really bottomed out over the second half of the season. I think they lost 4 of their final 6 games. They missed out on the playoffs to the Jaguars in one of those weird 3 division ties or tiebreaker in which the Carolina Panthers, and the Atlanta Falcons all finished 8-9, and the tiebreakers went in favor of the Carolina Panthers. This was a football team that really struggled, at least in the second half of the year, on both sides of the football. The play from Baker Mayfield the second half of the season was not where the Bucks needed to be. He was, someone they talked about as an MVP candidate at the start of the year, and really struggled to maintain that through the second half of the year. Defensively, they weren't nearly as good as they were the second half of the year as well. This was a defense that was pretty poor over the course of the entire season, but it really showed during the second half of the year. And they, very similarly to the Bucks, to the Jags, have some kind of big decisions they have to make for players within their own team. So where do we start with the Bucks? We start as they're under the cap, and they have the ability to create more money if needed. The first way of doing that would potentially be extensions. Baker Mayfield's the first one that we're going to talk about. He's going into a contract year. His first 2 seasons in Tampa were outstanding. He became the quarterback I think many people thought he was going to be when he got drafted, and rolled that into the start of the 2025 season. The wheels kind of came off during the second part of the season, not just for Mayfield. This isn't being pinned straight on him, but his play didn't help. This kind of creates a problem for Tampa, right? An extension now becomes a little bit more risky than it would have been a year or 2 ago. Doesn't help that his cap hit is $51 million this season. So Tampa's hands may be forced, and we'll talk about why with their free agents in a minute, but they may be forced to extend Baker just because they need to get that cap number. Vita Vea is another one. He just turned 31, but Vita Vea is still a top producer in his position. He's been really good since he's been in Tampa. Odds are they talk extension this year. He's heading into a contract year as well, so keep an eye on him. Maybe they look to extend him, lower his cap number a little bit as well. And the last one is just Chase McLaughlin. His number won't have any impact on the cap, but he's coming into a contract year, and he's been one of the most consistent kickers in the NFL. So look to see, maybe they look to extend him now or before the start of next season. So again, this is a team that's going to need to look to free up some money. I think Tristan Wirth and Anton Winfield are 2 guys that they're going to look to kind of convert those salaries to signing bonuses. They can create almost $20 million with Wirth. They can create around $14 million with Winfield. Godwin is another one that they can convert his bonus to his salary to a bonus, and free up around $60 million. But he's a guy who over the last 2 years has struggled to stay healthy. So again, when we're talking about restructuring contracts, we're talking about taking money and pushing it down the line. And you don't want to be paying a player who's no longer on your team.
Mm-hmm.
So the Bucks might look at Godwin and say, hey, we'll wait until next year to figure out what we want to do. If we can get a healthy season out of him, we'll be happy. So that takes us to their free agents. And this team has a number of players that have been impactful for them. Some played well last year, some didn't, but guys who have been a part of this team. And again, this is an organization that's been pretty well run over the last 10 years or so. And we'll start with Mike Evans. Mike Evans is a free agent. He's been a staple in Tampa since joining the Bucks in 2017. Again, Evans is, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Finn, the first player in NFL history to have 1,000 yards in his first 11 seasons.
Yes.
He did that last year. That ended this year. Evans battled a ton of injuries. He was injured a little last year, but it really hit this year. And at 32, that starts to ask, you have to start to ask questions about what you'd want to pay him in an extension. Spotrac has him valued at $13.5 million. I am sure the Bucs would want to keep him, and I think he wants to stay in Tampa. But if he hits the open market, he could be a player that's going to attract a lot of interest and very well could be outpriced for Tampa. So Mike Evans is the first one. The second one we've already mentioned a couple times, Jamel Dean. Dean was Tampa's best defensive player this year. If he hits the open market, he will probably be one of, if not a top 3 corner option for teams this offseason. I personally think he's the top corner in this free agent class. The Bucs have interest in keeping him. With cap restraints, he's another guy that if he hits the open market, can the Bucs find a number that works for him and the Bucs, or are the Bucs priced out of him? Logan Hall's a defensive tackle for this team. They have 2 younger guys in and around the defensive line, whether it's Calais Cansey, who was a draft pick from Pittsburgh, or Elijah Roberts, who was one of their draft picks. I think he was a draft pick, or no, he was a 5th-round draft pick last year who played a little bit. I think Logan Hall leaves this offseason. They let the younger guys play. Cade Otton has been good, but not great for the Bucs. He played tight end. He's 26 this year. He's 26. I think the Bucs go in a different direction, and I'll touch on this when it comes to tight end and need. I just think Cade Otton's been afforded opportunities and hasn't really made much of it. Despite being a consistent, safe set of hands, I think they'll look to go in a different direction. Levante David's been there since 2012. He's been the leader and the heartbeat of this defense. I read a report today that said he's still not decided on what he's going to do, whether he retires or whether he plays next year. I think if he plays it next year, him and the Bucs will try to find something that works. His play did drop off. He wasn't great this year, but he's still someone who I think has the respect of everybody, not just in that team, in that locker room, but the organization. So it would be interesting to keep an eye on him. Rashid White's, they drafted him in 22, running back for Tampa. I think it's it for him. I think with Bucky Irving, who looks like the primary guy, and I just think they're going to want to go in a different direction. At the projected price, I don't think it makes sense. Spotrac has him valued at $7.5 million. I don't know if he'll get that. If he does, he will not be a Tampa Bay Buck. So White, I think, leaves. And then the last 2 are Son Reddick, who signed as an edge rusher last year from the Jets, right? He was on the Jets last year.
Oh yeah, he was on the Jets.
And Sterling Shepard, who's been there for a little bit. I don't think either of these guys come back. Reddick was a guy that I think they hoped they could get the best out of him. As you heard by Finn's voice, he wasn't very good for the Jets 2 years ago or 2 seasons ago, and he really wasn't much of anything for Tampa this year. So that was a failed experiment. And Sterling Shepard is a consistent pass-catching option for this football team, but when you look at this team's wide receiver options, this is without Mike Evans. They still have Chris Godwin, banged up, but a caliber wide receiver if he's healthy. They have Emeka Egbuka, who was really good at the beginning of the year, and then once Evans came back, his targets went down a little bit. He's going to be targeted next year. Jalen McMillan, who is a draft pick from Washington, has struggled to stay on the field, but if he can stay healthy, he could be an option for this team. And Tez Johnson played a little bit last year, and when he played, he scored touchdowns. So they have more than enough options at wide receiver. I think Sterling Shepard hits the market, and he'll probably go be a third option for somebody else looking for kind of a veteran wide receiver. So when we look at this team, very similar to the Dallas Cowboys, where their needs are, this team needs defensive help. And that's before they figure out what's going to happen with Jamel Dean and Levante David. Whether David goes or not, this team needs an upgrade at linebacker. They can use help off the edge. Yaya Diaby looks like he's a capable pass rusher. I'm going to pull it up very quickly while I'm talking about them here. I think he had 9.5 sacks last year. 7 sacks last year, excuse me. So he led them in the sack category, but they need somebody else opposite of him. Todd Bowles loves the blitz, but the Bucks had 38 sacks last season. That's the lowest they've had under Bowles. So I think they're going to look not just to add edge help, but help in the secondary safeties, corners that can kind of get after the quarterback and help him run whatever he wants to do blitz wise. I think if Dean returns, there's still a solid core in Tampa with Anton Winfield and rookie Ty K. Smith, excuse me. I still think they need another corner. Dean will take up a big chunk of whatever it is they pay him, or in terms of the salary cap, excuse me. I don't know if I don't know if free agency will be where they looked at a corner. Maybe it'd be the draft. If Dean leaves, I think this team needs to add two corners, and then I think they look in free agency and they take that money and maybe go with some of the guys we've talked about: Tyreek Woolen, D. Alford, maybe, who's okay in Atlanta, maybe Rasul Douglas, who's a veteran who had a good year for Miami, maybe a Cordell Flott, who's good for the Giants. Guys in that price range, and then look to draft another corner in that regard. On offense, really feels like this team needs a complimentary running back to Bucky Irving. Irving is, to me, as dynamic as they come in the NFL. I loved him coming out of college. When he's healthy, he can carry the ball. He can catch it out of the backfield. I think this team needs a more physical back to complement uh, with Bucky Irving. And again, you can look at free agency and maybe Tyler Algier is a guy who can do it.
Mhm.
You can get him on a cheaper deal. Austin Eckler was hurt last year, but maybe you can bring a guy like him or Brian Robinson Jr. in to complement what you get from Bucky Irving, and both those guys can still catch the ball out of the backfield. Um, and then for me, I really would love to see this team target a tight end. Again, where they pick, I don't have that number in front of me. I don't know if you can look that up while I'm talking here.
I believe it's 15. I think they're 15.
Yeah, so that might not be that might be a little high to go with the kid from Oregon, but he could be on their radar. But for a team that throws the ball, not way more than they run it, but they threw the ball around 56% of the time on offense. If you can get a tight end that can help in that side of the game, it's going to help your wide receivers. It's going to help Bucky Irving, and it's going to add another dimension to this football team. So that's where I think this team's needs lie.
Yeah, definitely echo what you're saying. Defensively, I mean, they really need somebody else on that defensive line that can really add to the pass rush. Like you said, Hassan Reddick was a major disappointment last year. Actually, over the second half of the year, that Tampa Bay only averaged a little over one sack a game um, in the second half last season. So, yeah, you mentioned Levante David. I mean, he's 36 years old now, and I mean, I think he just finished like his 14th season or something like that. So, even if he comes back another season, I don't know what his plan. I don't know if he's planning to retire, and I haven't heard anything about that. But they don't have much depth there behind him. And then, it was as we mentioned, Jamel Dean, probably the top corner on the market. If he signs elsewhere, they got to bring somebody else in, some veteran player to pair with the young guys like Benjamin Morrison and Jacob Parrish. So, definitely defensively, wide receiver wise, man, I think Mike Evans is leaving there. I mean, obviously they'll probably want to get a deal done, but I mean, it's a Mecca Buka's wide receiver room, I think, at this point.
And
Um,
and, and I think that'd be totally fair. I mean,
yeah.
Emeka Buka showed more than enough signs that he can be a number one wide receiver, and with some of those guys behind him, you still feel good about it. This feels like a team, and I'm curious to get your opinion on it. It feels like the team that's like kind of ending what was a very successful run. When you look
Mhm.
at this defense, and there are some pieces on it, but Antoine Winfield is still a pretty good player. Vita Vey can still play at a high level. Like I mentioned, they like those two young tackles, but they need linebacker help. They could need secondary help. This is a defense that could really fall off a cliff next year. And while you still might like their offense, and their offensive line is pretty good, not great, or if they can't get it right this offseason defensively and they can't retain some of these guys, this might be a team that, kind of falls off.
Mhm. Yeah, agreed. And like you mentioned earlier, I mean, over the past 10 years or so, well, really until right since they hired Bruce Arians, since Tom Brady went there, they were always a team that was one of the, upper echelon teams in the league. Of course, once Brady and Arians left, they fell off maybe a little bit. Maybe instead of being like a top five team, they were like a top 10 team still in the league. But yeah, it feels like that roster's starting to wear thin at this point. Guys getting up there in age. But yeah, to echo what you're saying, yeah, I mean the linebacker help. I mean, I have Nakobe Dean who could be a fit here. You know, he's good blitzing ability that Todd Bowles likes. A guy like Leo Chanel, maybe a younger player who might not cost as much, from the Kansas City Chiefs. And then if they are looking to spend big on the pass rush, Trey Hendrickson, he's a good fit for a Bucks team who, you know, they believe they're still in win now mode. If they can't get him though, I have guys here like Arnold Ebiketie and Azeez Ojulari who could potentially be the add to the pass rush there. But yeah, I mean, looking at them, pick number 15. Yeah, I'm echoing what you're saying about the defense. They really need to
And
add some younger guys who could be some developmental pieces going forward.
and this isn't a knock on the Bucks and what they've done, but when you look at this team, they look a bit older, and it kind of shows you that their last couple draft classes haven't been great. They haven't been awful, but they really haven't found the caliber of player they found a couple years ago when they really were having their success and competing for Super Bowls. And, you know, it kind of feels like the end of that era. And they're still a well-run team and a well-run front office, but they're gonna have to hit on some draft picks this year, and they're really gonna have to hit on some, you know, maybe lower tier free agents to help kind of keep this thing stabilized.
So that was Tampa Bay. So we'll go to the AFC now. I want to see, can I take teams off the wheel? Oh, I can. Okay, so this is good. So let's see. I want to make sure we don't land on the same teams twice here. So let's see. I spoke about Denver and Jacksonville. Okay. Oop, wrong way. All right, let's see what we land on. Just my luck, I feel like it's gonna land on the Jets. I really don't want to talk about them tonight. Are you freaking kidding me, Tom? Yo, I
Here we go.
swear, bro. Like, I did not. I just spun the wheel, dude. I just mentioned this team, dude, and they freaking pop up.
Everybody buckle up. This is gonna be fun.
Dude, dude, just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in, bro. Ugh, this freaking abysmal franchise that I root for. All right, let me pull up. I mean, I probably don't really need the notes for this one, but this is, yeah. So, all right. So the Jets, the New York Jets, a disastrous 3-14 season here. Which actually extended their playoff drought to 15 years. Tom, what were we doing 15 years ago? Do you remember?
We were in college.
We were in college, bro. We were like,
We were
let's
at
see.
St. Thomas Aquinas. Shout out Pryor.
Shout out. Yes, that's right. Shout out Bill Pryor and the pride of Stack. Yeah, 21 years old. I just became legalized to have myself a drink. And since then, the New York Jets have failed to make the playoffs. This playoff drought is almost old enough to legally drive a car in some
There we
states.
go.
Dude, unbelievable how bad this team has become. Yeah, the playoff drought is now 15 years, which is it's actually technically tied for the longest in North American sports. It's tied with the Buffalo Sabres, who actually they actually are playing pretty well this year. They actually might end their playoff drought. I
Yeah,
have an article up
I think
on
that
Loft.
one's ending.
Yeah, dude, I have a Loft on loftsportus.com, folks. I have an article up on the Buffalo Sabres, how the drought could end this year for
I
them.
think it's
So
ending.
that's right. Go on the website. Check us out. Tage Thompson, by the way, scored a goal today for Team USA with a bit. What was the final score of that game, by the way? As a get off
6-2, I
topic
think.
here.
I stopped watching as we started, but I think it was 6-2 the last I peeked on my
6-2.
TV.
Yeah, so USA Canada on Sunday as we go a little bit off the tracks here. But so if you recall, folks, the Jets were actually the last winless team in the league this year. They were 0-7 at one point, and they rotated through so many different quarterbacks, which has basically become the norm every single season. They started with Justin Fields, and they went to Tyrod Taylor, and then they went to Brady Cook. And as you might recall, at the trade deadline this year, they traded their two best defensive players, Sauce Gardner, who was traded to the Indianapolis Colts. The Jets got back 2 first-round picks and a player in Adonai Mitchell. Remember we mentioned earlier about the Max Crosby, if he gets traded, Raiders were asking for 2 picks and a player. The Jets actually got that for Sauce Gardner. And then, as you mentioned, when you were talking about the Cowboys, Quinnen Williams, the Jets got a second for Quinnen this year and a first for Quinnen in next year's draft. So the Jets, that was probably the high point, getting those draft picks to build for the future, because they ended the season on a 5-game losing streak. They lost all 5 games by at least 20 points, and actually they were the first they were the first team in NFL history to finish dead last in point differential, turnover differential, and yardage differential. The defense went the whole season without recording 1 interception, which set an NFL record. And if there's one thing the Jets do better than anyone, Tom, they lose. And they just set unpredictable new standards for losing football games. So, the few positives that I'll mention: Breece Hall, first time in his career over 1,000 yards. The offensive line. So the Jets' offensive line was actually the only offensive line that stayed intact for all 17 games this year. So they basically were so bad going 3-14 this season. They actually wasted a good offensive line year where everybody was healthy, which is great. Yeah, so the offensive line is in pretty good shape heading into the offseason. I'll say that about them. And it should be a good support system for whatever they do at quarterback, whether it's a veteran option coming in or if it's a rookie coming in. They're set at left tackle, center, right guard, and right tackle. Left guard's a little up in the air. They got Elijah Vera Tucker, and John Simpson, who are both free agents. I believe the Jets will keep at least one of them while the other one walks. But I'll get into free agency a little bit here. So the Jets overall, 24 players hitting free agency, and they'll have somewhere between $80 to $95 million in cap space. So they will be big spenders in free agency. If they are not, everybody is getting fired because this is a bare bones roster. Especially defensively, the defensive side resembles an expansion team. That's how bad the defense was. If you look back at like week 17 when they played Buffalo, look at some of the names of the guys on the field. Tom, I don't think you could name any of these guys. That's how bad it was. I couldn't even name most of the guys on that defense at the end of the season.
Was Cisco playing at the end of the year?
Yeah, he was hurt. He got hurt during the year. He wasn't playing. He was out.
I'm
Of
looking
course,
at their
Sauce and
depth chart.
Quinton are
He might have been
gone.
the only one I can know.
I think the only guy you might know is probably Will McDonald. That might be it.
I do know. Yeah, I do know Will McDonald.
Yeah. So, but yeah, they will be big spenders in free agency. They have to spend money. Big free agents hitting the market. So number one is Breece Hall, right? He's still only 24 years old, just coming off his first 1,000-yard season. He's probably looking for a contract. I would probably estimate around like $12 million per. He's a prime candidate for the franchise tag to keep him from hitting the market. I think that's exactly what the Jets are going to do. You want to lock up Breece Hall. It's just they have so many holes that they have to fill. Just one less hole. Keep Breece back there. Maybe you can even, I don't think he'll want to sign, but maybe try to work towards like a short-term extension, maybe like a 2-year or 3-year maybe, because you need someone in the backfield, especially if you're going to put a rookie quarterback in there. You need someone reliable to hand the ball off to in the run game. Another guy who I mentioned, Elijah Vera Tucker. So when he plays, he is an elite offensive lineman. But the issue is he just never freaking plays. He's been plagued by injuries the past couple of years. He's only played in 43 of a possible 85 games. So personally, I would look to bring him back on a 1 or 2-year deal, looking at the current state of the roster, because I'm not looking, again, I don't want to create more holes here. You can go in next year with Elijah Vera Tucker, suited in at left guard, and you are set across the line. You have Olu Fashanu, former first-round pick. AVT, Elijah Vera Tucker, is a former first-round pick. Josh Myers is at center, who they picked up from the Packers last offseason. At right guard, you got Joe Tippmann, who's an emerging guard in the league. He was a second-round pick out of Wisconsin last year. And on right tackle, you've got Armin Membu, who's another first-round pick. So you legit have like 3 first-round picks and a second-round pick potentially on that offensive line heading into next season. Their big defensive free agent is Quincy Williams, who, look, he was a former All-Pro linebacker here. Underneath Robert Saleh when he was the coach. Last year, his production was really, really way down. Plus, I don't think he was too happy when Quinnen got traded. I'm surprised they didn't trade Quincy at the deadline. I feel like they could have gotten maybe a 4th-round pick for him, but I think at this point, Quincy could use a fresh new start, and I just don't see any way the Jets are bringing him back at this point. And I do want to give another free agent special shout out, Nick Folk, bro, former Jet and former Dallas Cowboy, 41 years old.
Wow.
Still kicking strong. He made 28 of 29 field goals last year. He's still on his game. If I were the Jets, I would try to bring him back if he wants a 1-year deal. All right. Coaching. Aaron Glenn. So Aaron Glenn, it's a little different this year. So Glenn's actually going to be taking over the play calling on defense this season. Last year, he wanted to be like that CEO type of head coach. So he hired Steve Wilks, brought him in. Steve Wilks, he said, Steve, you run the defense. This is your thing. You do what you want to do. Steve Wilks was freaking awful. It was abysmal how bad the defense was, especially the run defense. So that was completely the wrong decision, letting Steve Wilkes run the defense. So right, Wilkes gets fired late in the season. I think it was week 14 they let him go. And now Glenn, this is his show running the defense. So Glenn, he's bringing over Brian Duker, who was with him in Detroit. Duker worked with the Dolphins last year, but Brian Duker is the new DC. In Detroit, Aaron Glenn preferred to use a lot of man coverage, specifically like cover one, where he had his corners basically play on an island. And, his corners were really good in press man coverage. Who could they have used as a corner now that they may have traded at the trade deadline to fit Aaron Glenn's scheme, I wonder? So he was an aggressive blitzer in Detroit. Even last year with the Jets, with Wilkes, the Jets they increased their blitz rate a lot compared to when Robert Saleh was the coach. It's just they used a lot of zone blitzes, and none of those blitzes got home. So Aaron Glenn, right, he uses a lot of a 4-3 front. Much of his career, that's what he's been under, whether it's in Detroit or New Orleans. There are rumors that Jets actually might use more 3-4 fronts this season. Glenn says he wants to return to his two gapping principles, which is right what he used in Detroit. The Jets, this was actually we want to talk about position coaches. I like that the Jets brought over Carl Dunbar. He was the defensive line coach for the Steelers. He was there for, I think it may have been about a decade under Mike Tomlin. He's noted as one of the best defensive line coaches in the league. He was actually with the Jets back during the Rex Ryan days for a couple of years as a defensive line coach, and expectations, right, bringing him in as a defensive line coach. Ideally, the Jets will use the number 2 pick on the draft on one of the top 2 edge rushers, being either David Bailey or Ruben Bain. Now let's get into the offense. Frank Reich. So Aaron Glenn hired Frank Reich as the offense coordinator for the season, right? Former Carolina Panthers head coach there for a year. Actually, I don't even think he lasted a year. And then he was known for being the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts too. So he's taken over an offense that ranked 29th in scoring and dead last in passing yards. Frank Reich, over his career, he's used kind of like a hybrid approach of the West Coast offense that basically emphasizes attacking the middle of the field. He relies on a lot of 11 personnel. So 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end. Historically, he's used a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. It's actually the amount of wide receiver sets he's actually used is at a 15% higher rate than league average. So it's a lot. And this is going to be a shakeup from last season. The Jets initially wanted to use a lot of 12 personnel last year, so they wanted to use 2 tight ends, but Reich seems to like to want to air it out depending on who's playing quarterback. His system prioritizes the short to intermediate passing game and uses of like mesh concepts. So, right, 2 receivers crossing paths, trying to rub defenders. His run scheme is an inside zone, as he wants his offensive line to really move defenders vertically. And running backs are constantly targeted out of the backfield in his offense. So the offense would be a good fit for Breece Hall, who's actually, after Garrett Wilson, probably their most reliable receiver. So let's talk about free agent fits right now, guys who would fit Aaron Glenn's defense and Frank Reich's offense. So there have been rumors already about Alex Anzalone from Detroit. So, right, it's a logical fit here for Aaron Glenn's defense. He spent time with Glenn in Detroit. He knows the defense. He would provide some veteran leadership to a team that desperately needs it on defense. He's a little bit older now. I think he's like 32 years old. So the contract shouldn't be too overwhelming, honestly. Another guy, though, that could fit that need, Leo Chanel from the Chiefs. Could be a cheaper option who also fits Aaron Glenn's defense. Let's talk about another guy. So Breece Hall, if he walks, I like Tyler Algier, who we mentioned earlier. Algier would be a good replacement here as he fits the scheme of what Reich wants to achieve on offense, a good physical runner. And then they could also pair him with Isaiah Davis, who I really like. He was a 5th-round pick out of South Dakota State a couple of years ago, who could be the RB2 in that situation. So another free agent fit, so the Jets have money. They can spend money here. Alec Pierce is a free agent. They have the money to make it work. Now, sure, you'll be investing a lot of money in Alec Pierce and Garrett Wilson together, but Garrett Wilson can work the slot, while Pierce is a burner who can stretch the defense and create room for the running game. Alec Pierce averaged 16 yards per catch last season. The contract, it's going to be over $20 million a year. It might get to like the $25 to $30 million a year for Alec Pierce, but it's something I would at least look into because honestly, the Jets offensive line is in solid shape. All you really need, outside of quarterback being the obvious need, they need another wide receiver, especially if Frank Reich's going to run the 3 wide receiver sets. If you have Garrett Wilson, Alec Pierce, maybe Adonai Mitchell, who they got from the Colts in the Sauce trade, that could be a pretty solid 3 receiver stretch. You have Mason Taylor, who's a 2nd-year tight end out of LSU. He could operate as the tight end 1 in that scheme. So That's the scheme that we're looking at here. As far as quarterbacks go, I mean, all right, so here's what I think they'll do. They're gonna bring in a veteran that's gonna start games at least for the first half of the season, and then they're going to draft a quarterback. We don't know who they're gonna draft, but here are the options that I think they're gonna go. Free agency. It's been, I swear to God, I feel like it's rumored like every year with this guy, Kirk Cousins, who has apparently a relationship with Frank Reich. I guess they're kind of close. He's never technically coached him, but I guess they're very they've been aligned through their faith basically. So they do have some kind of relationship there. Plus, Frank Reich really likes his big quarterbacks who can see over the line that are good pocket passers. Try to think of Andrew Luck in a way. So Kirk Cousins as the quarterback. If not him, I could see the Jets. I don't know what it's going to cost. I could see them making a play for Tanner McKee. I think the Eagles would probably want like a second day pick, but the Jets at least should kind of look into it, as I feel like McKee might have a higher ceiling than any of the veteran options on free agency. As far as the draft goes, you're going to hear a lot of connections to Ty Simpson from Alabama. In my opinion, the Jets have this a pick at number 16. I think it's way too high to draft Ty there. But if Simpson were to fall to the second round, maybe like pick 33, the Jets have the first pick of the second round. That could be a great spot for Ty. Even if, you know what, if they want to secure the 5th-year option, they can trade up at the back of the first round, maybe ahead of a team like the Rams, who, right, you picked the Rams to pick Ty Simpson last week in our mock draft. That could be a team that they'll have to jump. Maybe they can trade up with a team at, I don't know, 27 or 28 to try to lock in Ty and have that 5th-year option available. If not Ty Simpson, look for a guy like Garrett Nussmeier. I think, he had a lot of injuries this past season, but I think he's a guy who, he was looked at potentially as like a high first-round pick, Garrett Nussmeier. But so that's some kind of combination of Cousins and McKee as your vet, along with the rookie of Simpson or Garrett Nussmeier. And hey, if Tyrod Taylor, if he wants to take a 1-year deal to hang around, I'd be open to bringing him back too. So, yeah, that's my rant on this football team playing out of East Rutherford, New Jersey.
You wouldn't want to take a chance on Malik Willis?
I mean, they could look into it, dude. I'm like, I
I
don't
I
know. I'm not a Malik Willis guy,
I
honestly. It
I
just,
think I think that's fair, and at the same time, I think whoever signs Malik Willis, his name will be brought up probably a bunch
I
over
will
the
bring
next.
him up. Yeah, I have a prediction for where he's going to go. I'm not going to
Yeah,
say it until I get to
yeah.
that team.
He may be, outside of Daniel Jones, the top option in free agency. So I think wherever he goes, he's going to want insurance in his contract in terms of years. So I could see the Jets not wanting to commit 3 years to Malik Willis at 12, $15 million, and then he plays 17 games and he's not that great. Despite I thought he looked good at the end of this year and was kind of one of those guys that I would give him a chance, but I don't know if the Jets are that team to give him a chance. I think Tanner McKee could be had. I mean, with this football team, the talk is going to be quarterback, quarterback, quarterback. I still think there's a world where this team flips not 2, but maybe 16 and picks up. They have 3 next year.
3 first-rounders next year, yep.
I could see a world where they try to get a 4th, and then next year's draft class. We'll talk about it in 6 months about these quarterbacks, and who
Yeah.
knows how many of them will pan out or not pan out. But at least there's going to be options and names. And when you look at this year's, it's Mendoza, who the Jets aren't going to get. Well, we don't think it's Mendoza. It's Simpson. It's Nussmeier, who played well at the Senior Bowl, and then the North Dakota kid, who I haven't watched yet. His name's starting to come up. I know that won't move Jet fans either. So it's slim pickings where next year you'll have plenty of options, or at least you can evaluate a number of different guys and probably come down with one that you like. So I still think that's what the Jets are going to do, which is why McKee's a good shout. His name's going to be mentioned a decent amount here, especially coming from the Eagles. There are a lot of people within the Eagles that really like him. I think he could be had for a day 2 pick. I don't know if I'd give up a day 2 pick for a guy who
Right.
played 1 or 2 games last year, but who knows? Maybe the Jets look at him and go for that. But yeah, when you look at this team, it's quarterback. You need to figure out the quarterback. I look at him, I please get another wide receiver. I can't keep watching Garrett Wilson try to do everything on his own out there. I feel so bad for this guy. I like Adonai Mitchell out of college. I liked him. I don't know how he played for the Jets this year,
He was
but
okay down the stretch. He just, you know what, dude, when you play with Brady Cook, who, I'll just be honest, it wasn't Brady Cook's fault, but I mean, a guy who doesn't belong in the NFL, I mean, that's what's going to happen. You're not going to put up the big numbers.
I agree with that completely. So We'll see where we'll see what happens with him, but maybe he's an option. But this team needs a second option, whether it's one of those guys you named, or maybe it's a Rashid Shaheed, or maybe they look to draft somebody. This is a very deep draft class. I also would love to see his team get some secondary help.
Mm.
Um,
Safety is a concern. Safety is definitely a concern.
whether it's safety, I know you're talking pass rusher. You mentioned a 3-4, and I think a 3-4 would be great. I get Jet fans want pass rushers. I still believe in JJ. I think Jermaine Johnson can be a pass rusher, and Will McDonald had a pretty solid year this year. I think both of them in a 3-4 would benefit better than in a 4-3. They're both a little undersized and not as I want to say not as powerful because there's explosiveness there, but they're not as big. And I don't know how they held up against the run, but I always get weary of those lankier, not as big ends having to go up against tackles every play against a run. So a 3-4 maybe helps you there with those guys, and then maybe pass rush doesn't become a need. I mean, I look at this team and I know they're talking pass rush, and there's a big part of me that sits there and goes, I would take Caleb Downs at 2. He's going to be the best player available in the draft. He's going to make your defense better. Aaron Glenn would love him. I know you don't love it. I can see it there on the camera. A safety at 2 doesn't move you, but this is going to be a kid who in 4 years, 5 years is one of the 3 best players at his position, and you're going to be watching Sunday Night Football going, there he is making another play. I wish my team had one of those. So I get it. I
It's
get
a
it.
luxury position, though. You know what it is? Like, you're giving me flashbacks to when we took Jamal Adams at number 6
He,
when
yeah, I totally get that. He's not Jamal Adams, so he's the complete polar opposite of Jamal Adams, and I get it. Like,
personality-wise, I hope he's polar opposite too.
he's polar opposite of everything. Like, as a Cowboy fan, it's the same way when they drafted Roy Williams and they never wanted to draft a safety again. Like, this guy is a little bit different, and we saw it with Kyle Hamilton. And again, he's not Kyle Hamilton. Kyle Hamilton fell because he didn't run fast enough. I think 31 teams in the NFL would take Kyle Hamilton right now. So I throw that out there. The Jets do have a number of other areas. Their interior, you'd like to see maybe add something as well. Linebacker, if Quincy leaves, which I think he will, you're going to need linebacker help as well. But the Jets have money. Like, any big name guy, they should at least be in the conversation with. If the guy looks at the Jets and goes, I want to go to a contender, okay, that makes sense. But
Right.
I don't think the Jets are as many pieces away as maybe the beaten up Jet fans think they are from at least competing for a playoff spot.
Offensively, they're not. Offensively, they're closer than they are defensively, which, dude, at this point, if you're a Jets fan, like, I'll just be, let's talk. If you're a Jets fan, listen to this. You know that this team hasn't been competitive honestly, probably since 2017. That's how bad it's been when Josh McCown was the quarterback. All we really ask for is, speaking for Jet fans, just show me a watchable product. The product hasn't been watchable
Yeah.
in just so many years. It's crazy.
And,
Like, even with Rodgers, 2 years ago, it wasn't watchable, dude. He
yep.
wasn't any good.
Well, and to your point, if they spend money and they go out on defense, and again, even if it's not the high-priced guys, I'm sure at some point we'll go through a list of free agents of position needs, and the Jets could be in the conversation with 3 or 4 of the mid-pack guys who they may have to overpay for. But if they improve the defense and that offense is good and you get a draft right, I think the Jets could compete next year, depending on the quarterback position.
Right. And I don't even, I'm not even worried about overpaying at this point. I mean, just get some talent in the building,
Yeah.
dude. That's
Okay.
it.
So your question, you mentioned it with Sauce, right? 2 first-round picks and a player.
Yeah.
Who has more value in your opinion, Sauce or Max Crosby?
Absolutely, Max Crosby.
Yeah,
It's
I
not even
agree with you.
close.
The
The thing with Sauce, like, Sauce is excellent corner. The big criticism with Sauce is that he never affected the game. He never caught interceptions. He never forced fumbles. He's a shaky tackler. Like, he can take away one player, but I'll be honest, dude. Like, look, I mean, I think a lot of people used to get on Sauce because, like, look, dude, when you have Darrelle Revis on your team, when you see shutdown corner, you expect Darrelle Revis. I don't know if there ever will be another Darrelle Revis ever again. So people, I think, always compared Sauce to Darrelle, which isn't fair to Sauce at all. But with that being said, yeah, Sauce just didn't do enough to take away big plays. And even sometimes he would get beat on occasion, like all corners do. So it's like, oh, why are we paying this guy so much money when he's getting beat by, a number 2 wide receiver? I'll be honest, like, after watching Sauce over the past couple of years, yes, he's really good, but I feel like I'm at the point where I think I would prefer to have a corner who is even more boom or bust sometimes. I'm cool with taking a guy who gets beat on occasion,
I
but
had
if
that
that
with
same guy's
Trayvon
pulling
Diggs.
me 4 or 5 interceptions in a season, give me that guy who's turning the ball over for me for our defense.
I had that with Trayvon Diggs. Yeah, maybe you're right in some situations. I'd rather the corner. I mean, if my defense is predicated on takeaways, and yeah, you want takeaways, then I think there's something fundamentally flawed with the defense to begin with. Like we'll probably talk about that a little bit with the Bears when I talk about the Bears, whenever that is. I don't love my defense being overly reliant on takeaways, but I do get your point, and I think there's truth to it too. It's just funny you mentioned that because you had mentioned Max before, and I was like, man, 2 firsts and a player for him, like, that's a lot, and then you brought up that's what the Jets got, and I sat there
Yeah.
and I went, "You know what? Crosby has more value than Sauce," and
Mhm.
the Jets got it. I get why the Raiders are asking what they're asking for.
Yeah. All right, I don't want to talk about this team anymore. All right, so let's let's move on. NFC. So let me see. So you spoke about
Cowboys and the Bucks.
Dallas and the Bucks. So let's get them off the wheel. All right, here we go. This is what the third team you've spoken about? Okay. Yeah, so we're almost halfway through our show here, folks. Oh, another New York team. Oh, wait, maybe it's the Saints? The New York
Oh
Football
my.
Giants. We're staying in East Rutherford here.
From New York to New York. Let me
Yeah.
get the New York Giants up here. Okay,
Okay,
so
so
the New York Giants. Let me do this very quickly. Okay. So
so
the New
the
York Giants. Um, a very strange season for the Giants. When you look at the Giants, they finished 4-13, and they weren't happy with their coaching, and they fired their coach, and they've hired John Harbaugh, who I'll talk about in a second. But if you really look at the crux of the Giants' schedule, they lost a close game to the Cowboys, right? They lost a close game to the Broncos. They lost a close game to the Bears, a close game to the Pack. They lost an overtime game to the Lions, and then two of their 4 last losses late in the year were to the Commanders and the Vikings. All those games I just listed, which I think was 5 or 6, they were 1-score games. So for a football team that finished 4-13 and is picking at the top half of the draft again, this is a roster that when you look at it, probably isn't as far away as people think. I think the Giants line is set at 7.5 for next season wins. And I think if you gave me $100 right now and you asked me to put it on over under, I'd put it on the over. Right? When you look at this team and you look at the pieces they have Jackson Dart, who was sensational last year, at least for a rookie. He was injured. There are parts of his game that he has to work on. But when it comes to rookie quarterbacks, he probably was the one that when you watched him play flashed the most. Maybe he wasn't as good as Tyler Shough, who played half a season. If Shough played a full season, maybe he has better stats. But Jackson Dart made plays, and as being a Cowboy fan and living in the tri-state area, I watched a lot of the Giants, and Jackson Dart made a couple throws last year where you watch the Giants and you go, "Oh, that's a good throw." Like that kid made that throw. He has something that these other guys might not have. They have Cam Scatterbo, who they really, really like, was injured. We'll see how he recovers from that injury. That's not an easy injury to come back from. Dak Prescott had something similar, and granted, they're different positions and builds, but I do worry about athleticism after that injury. But they have Tyrone Tracy, too, who I really like. They have 2 good running backs they like. Malik Neighbors is a number 1. We'll see what happens with Wan'Dale Robinson. Neighbors is coming off of the injury. They have Theo Johnson, who was serviceable as a tight end, as a rookie tight end, finished with over 500 yards, 5 touchdowns. He was a red zone threat. My fans were happy with him, and he had a connection with Jackson Dart too. Their offensive line was better than people probably gave it credit for last year, right? This was a football team that gave up 15 sacks over the course of the entire season. They gave up 30 the year before. So there was definite improvement. Now the defense leaves a bit to be desired, right? You talk about this front with Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns and Abdul Carter and Kayvon Thibodeau. And while it was good, I don't think it was great. And I think there are a number of players that Giant fans would tell you they're not thrilled with. You look at the productivity of that defensive line. Brian Burns had 16.5 sacks. He was outstanding. Abdul Carter, for a rookie, had 4. And he had his issues, and you have to hope he grows up and he matures. But Kayvon Thibodeau had 2.5, and Dexter Lawrence had a half a sack. And we'll touch on them in a second. Drew Phillips graded out well as a cornerback, but that secondary needs help. Bobby Akarake, who they signed, played pretty well for them as well. So again, like, they have Tyler Nubin, who's a second-year safety who they like. Javon Holland they signed. There are pieces there for this football team, and then it will take us to the coach. They hired John Harbaugh. They fired Brian Dable. It was a long time coming. This team just looked dysfunctional under Dable, and now you add, the coach who many, myself included, felt was the best candidate in free agency. He comes to the Giants. He's going to have a say in personnel, and he's going to build a culture for this football team. He's going to hold people accountable. And I think you look at guys like Dexter Lawrence and Kayvon Thibodeau, and we'll kind of have to see what the Giants want to do with them moving forward. But if they underperform and if there are issues, even with a player like Abdul Carter, I wouldn't be shocked if they are quick to be moved on from. So, where are the Giants? They are under the cap. I think they're like a mid-pack under the cap. I don't think they have a lot of money, but they can free up a lot of money, right? How can they do it? The first one will be Brian Burns. They can restructure Brian Burns' contract. They can free $18 million up. I imagine that's something they're going to look to do. He's coming off of just a stellar season. So if they do that, they can free up some money there. Then you have a bunch of players who you kind of go, what are the Giants going to do with these guys? James Hudson's one of them. He's kind of been surpassed on that offensive line by Illuminor, and of course Andrew Thomas, who's an all-pro when he's healthy. Hudson can be cut. They can save $5.5 million there. Jalen Hyatt was a second-round pick that, quite frankly, just has not worked out. I can't see him being on the roster. Forget the $1.5 million that they can save. I imagine he's just gone. Graham Gano is an interesting one. He's been good for the Giants, but they can save $4.5 million. Maybe they look to bring him back. He's an option. They can cut him. Chris Board was a player they signed a year ago. They can cut him and free money up. Devin Singleton, they signed 2 seasons ago. They can free up almost $5 million if they cut him this offseason. They declined Dante Banks' fifth-year option. The future is not there for him. Another second-round pick, another swing and a miss in terms of draft classes for the Giants. I imagine they look to trade him. They probably don't cut him, having him on a rookie deal, which isn't expensive, but they're going to float him out there and see if somebody will take him on for a year. And then it comes to the big two. The first is Kayvon Thibodeau. Last year, before the Giants need to figure out what they needed to do, this is the last year before the Giants need to kind of figure out what they want to do with the fifth-year option. They have Burns and they have Carter. His name was floated around at the trade deadline in November. They can save almost $15 million if they trade him. I have to imagine the Giants look to trade him. Some team, maybe a team that likes what he's done prior to the last couple of years, or maybe even liked him a lot out of college. Maybe they pick him, they trade for him, maybe a late day 2, day 3 pick, and you pick up that 5th-year option. I think the Giants are going to look to trade him. If they don't, I expect them to hang on to him for a year and then let him walk. And then it's Dexter Lawrence. I don't expect the Giants to get rid of Dexter Lawrence, but he's a guy whose name you've heard mentioned as, I don't want to say an attitude problem, but just a player the Giants might look to move on now while there's still value. And if they trade him pre-June 1st, they can get $13 million for it. I'm not fully sold on that, but living in this area, when you talk to Giant fans, he's the type of name that gets mentioned. So keep an eye on Dexter Lawrence and Kayvon Thibodeau, especially as the draft comes up, as maybe options. So now that brings us to free agent options, right? So the Giants have Wan'Dale Robinson. He's valued by SpotTrack at $15 million. He led the Giants in receiving this year with just over 1,000 yards. He only had 4 touchdowns. I can't see the Giants paying that type of money to retain him, especially when he's not really he can play outside, but he's more of a slot guy. I think the Giants let him walk. Cordell Flott is a free agent as well. He's a 2019 draft pick from LSU. He was serviceable for the Giants. He's valued at $10 million. He was a good corner for them. I think if he hits the market, he'll get more than $10 million. I don't know if the Giants will sign him at that price. Jermaine Illuminor was good for the Giants. He didn't give up a lot of sacks. He took a lot of penalties. There's a consistency with that offensive line. So I have to imagine the Giants look to try to keep him, but he may come down to price. The same can be said for Greg Van Roten, an older guard. Does he retire? If he doesn't retire, he graded out pretty well this year for PFF. played a bunch at guard for the Giants. I think they look to retain him and Illuminor, and that kind of at least stabilizes the offensive line. Um, if those two leave, those positions immediately become needs for the Giants. They're going to need a starting tackle. They're going to need a starting guard. If they can retain both those guys, center is a position this team needs. Their name has already been rumored with Tyler Linderbaum. He played for John Harbaugh. He would probably be a guy that, with the money they free up, they look to attack. John Michael Schmidt was a guy they drafted who's been okay, but I'm sure that's a position they'd like to get better at. The next are on the defensive side of the football, where this team wasn't great last year. They're going to look to add linebackers. They're going to look to add corners. If they trade Dexter Lawrence, defensive tackle suddenly becomes an issue. But even with Dexter Lawrence staying, Raheem Nunez Roquez is a free agent. I don't think they'll keep. And Roy Robertson Harris was okay. So I think defensive tackle, linebacker at really any position, and secondary, specifically corner. I mean, if they can keep Cordell Flott, Drew Phillips was serviceable in the slot. Maybe they look for a guy who plays outside. But if they lose Cordell Flott, now we're talking about this team potentially looking for two corners, and they'll have money to spend. They're going to look for guys who can play on the outside. I don't know if they'll be in the Jamel Dean, Jalen Watson category, but maybe in the category of Josh Jobe, Alante Taylor, uh, Greg Newsome, Tyreek Woolen, maybe guys like that. And in a similar category in linebacker, I mean, I know they have a Karake who's good for them and they paid decent money for. They have Micah McFadden, who maybe they bring back, who's a free agent as well. And they look to add one linebacker. But yeah, this team needs bodies on defense, but the foundation is there. And with Harbaugh, I'm sure they're going to be happy with it.
Yeah, definitely echo what you were saying about the defense. The secondary just wasn't good last year. Deontay Banks, right? He was benched a lot during the year. I don't know what Harbaugh's going to think of Banks coming in. Do you know who's their defensive coordinator? Who did Harbaugh hire? Do you know?
That is a good question. I'll look
I
that
didn't
up
think
while
he
you're
hired
talking.
anybody yet. I thought they were kind of.
I know Wink Martindale was mentioned, but I don't think it is Matt Nagy is the offensive
That's
coordinator,
right.
and Denard Wilson, the
Denard
defensive
Wilson, okay. I know, yeah,
coordinator.
he was with the Titans
Yes,
for a little bit as their defensive coordinator, but yeah, you know what?
yes,
I was really high on the Harbaugh hire for the Giants. It definitely gives them like, you know, I like to say this a lot, like you have an adult in the room finally. Like, look, the
yes,
Giants,
yep.
Giants have been almost just as bad as the Jets over the past decade. They had that one playoff run, right? They both got into the playoffs the one year they beat the Vikings, and they got absolutely smashed by the Eagles in the divisional round. But I'm interested. I mean, I thought bringing in Harbaugh, the Giants would get rid of Joe Shane. But I guess Shane will be taking the back seat there to Harbaugh
Yeah,
going forward. I mean, the Matt Nagy hire kind of sours me, honestly, putting him with Jackson Dart. And I'll talk all about Matt Nagy when, you know, we talk about the Kansas City Chiefs when they pop up on the wheel. But yeah, I mean, the Chiefs offense was, you know, well, I'll get into that later. But yeah, I mean, you know, I'll say this about the Giants, dude. They were still a fun team to watch last year. Talk about a team. We go from the Jets, who were basically unwatchable, to a team like the Giants that was really fun. Jackson Dart, I mean, he looked pretty comfortable out there for a rookie his first year out there. You know, I mean, he looked reckless at times, and he's got to slide more, try not to take hits, get out of bounds when he can. He took a lot of nasty hits. How many times did he get checked for a concussion during the year? It had to have been at least 3 or 4 times.
I thought I remember reading that it was like 6 times. I
That's
could be
crazy, dude.
totally wrong on that, but
That is nuts, dude. But I'll say this, and I think when he started, I think he technically only played with Neighbors. I think for what, like, one game, right? Didn't Neighbors tear the ACL like in Dart's first start or something like that? So if I
yeah,
mean,
that makes sense.
yeah, so I mean, going into next year, if I'm a Giant fan, man, yeah, see Jackson Dart playing with Malik Neighbors, playing with Cam Scadaboo back in the backfield, and you know that's going to be that they have blue chip players. They have a guy like Brian Burns on the edge, Dexter Lawrence. I mean, like you said, we'll see what happens with him. Kayvon Thibodeau, I did see him I saw online some stuff about maybe the Giants would look to possibly trade him before, like you said, before they have to make a decision on the contract. So, but yeah, definitely echoing the secondary. I had Jamel Dean and Jalen Watson as potential.
Yeah, Linderbaum one is, yeah.
Basically what the crown jewel of free agency. I don't know if the Giants are really going to be able to, uh, their cap, are they towards the top of the league with cap
So
space wise?
so they're under the cap. It's not by much. They can free money up. Like, I think a number of those guys that I mentioned that they can cut, they're going to cut. So I think the Giants can get to the 40, 50, maybe $60 million mark,
Mm,
but they're going to have to be aggressive with moves, cutting
mhm,
guys, moving money around to do that. I don't know if they'll quite get to 60. If they get to 30, $40 million, they can target, they could potentially go after Jamel Dean. But
yeah,
then we're talking about that might be their move, and then the rest are building through the draft. I mean,
right.
Denard Wilson has a history of developing secondary guys. He's coached Kyle Hamilton and Darius Slay before. As I'm looking him up here, so I think secondary will be a focus for this football team. Again,
Mhm.
like with the Giants, I don't expect them to go out and sign 5 guys at 10, $15 million a clip. They have money to go out there and get 1 or 2 guys at a good price. And then I think the rest is, they'll look to build through the draft.
Okay. So that was the Giants. Good rundown on them, Tom. So let's see. Back to the AFC. So let's see. Oh, okay. Oh, good. So these teams are actually still off the wheel. That's good. So let's remove them. All right, AFC. This is the fourth AFC team tonight. Let's see. Who am I going to end up with? Give me a good team. I was rolling with the playoff teams until we got the Jets. Oh, okay, okay. I like this one. Los Angeles Superchargers. All right, let's get to my Chargers here. All right, so the Chargers, right? So this was year 2 under Jim Harbaugh that they just went through. They went 11-6, finishing second in the AFC West. It's actually pretty remarkable achievement that they were able to finish that high with the amount of the string of injuries that they experienced during the season. So, and that string of injuries actually started in training camp when Rashawn Slater went down with a season-ending injury, their left tackle. Then you had Joe Alt. He also missed 9 games, and the Chargers actually went through 29 different offensive line combinations, which led to Justin Herbert facing a 42% pressure rate, which was the second highest in the NFL. The offense was still productive, though, going through all those offensive line changes, but they just struggled with consistency so much with so much pass rush coming at them, especially in the red zone. They were 20th in scoring in the red zone, which led to Jim Harbaugh firing OC Greg Roman following the season. The defense, on the other hand, the defense under Jesse Minner, who's now the Baltimore head coach, was a top 10 defense in the league. They ranked 8th in points allowed at just under 20 per game. They had the second best red zone defense, frequently holding opponents to field goals. Derwin James, right, long-term safety, was named to his second team All-Pro for the 3rd time in his career. Here's a name for you. The linebacker, Tuli Tuipulotu, had a breakout season. He had 12 sacks this year, and the Chargers linebackers were all linebackers were all really good this year. Tuli Tuipulotu, Deion Henley, Odafe Oweh, when he came over from the trade with Baltimore, he actually didn't have any sacks at all in Baltimore. He comes over, he plays in a Jesse Minner defense, and I think he finished up with 7 sacks on the year. So, just like in Harbaugh's first year, the Chargers go out wild card weekend with a loss to the New England Patriots by a score of 16-3, and that game was basically a microcosm of the season, which was a strong defensive showing, wasted by a struggling offense. Justin Herbert for the year threw for 3,700 yards, 26 touchdowns, but he did throw 13 interceptions. Monty Vidal, who was an undrafted free agent, actually led the team in rushing with 643 yards. The Chargers are replacing both their coordinators in Harbaugh's second year. So Mike McDaniel, the former Dolphins coach, he's coming in to run the offense. And then Chris O'Leary was named the DC. O'Leary comes over from Western Michigan, where he was the defensive coordinator there. I'll get more into his background, though, when I talk about coaching. So here's the free agent situation for the Chargers. So their projected cap space is actually $82 million, which is the 4th most in the NFL. They have 27 players expected to hit the market. Some of their guys that are going to be hitting the market. So Odafe Oweh, who I mentioned a little earlier, who came over from Baltimore, 7.5 sacks coming over midseason from the Ravens. He actually had 3 in the playoff loss to the Patriots. And then you've got Khalil Mack. So Mack, long-time player here. He's 34 years old now. Still possibly could be an effective player. But he also could be considering retirement right now. We don't know his situation, but maybe he has like a third down pass rusher coming off the edge. He can still operate that way. Their offensive line, of course, we're going to talk about this a lot. Zion Johnson, who's one of their starting guards, he's actually coming off his best season as a pro. You know, he proved during the year to be reliable and a durable starter. He played in every game this year. He will likely command a significant contract, but the Chargers, like I said, 82 million in cap space. They have enough to make it work. They also just cut. I just saw they're releasing Mekhi Becton. He didn't work out there as a guard for them, so he'll be a free agent. So they just opened up more cap space by getting rid of him. And then, of course, I'm going to list here, right? Keenan Allen, who still going strong. He's getting up there in age, but he had 80 catches for 700 yards, 4 touchdowns. You know, he wants to keep playing. I don't see it happening with the Chargers as with Mike McDaniel coming in OC. He's going to want more guys with speed on his end. So let's talk about coaching now. So Mike McDaniel coming over from Miami to run the offense, and he's going to bring his high-speed, motion-heavy system to maximize Justin Herbert's physical traits. So expect the Chargers to use a lot of wide zone looks that mirror play-action passes and to use tight, condensed formations to force defensive backs into traffic, and get the receivers to run some rub routes. So this is a little different from the past of Jim Harbaugh offenses, which Harbaugh preferred more of a power-heavy scheme, so the guards pulling and more downhill force, while McDaniel's offense are more horizontal stretch running. So McDaniel is going to have plays designed for players to catch the ball in space, setting up opportunities for yards after the catch. That's their offense. Now, defensively, so Chris O'Leary, so people might not be familiar with him. So he was the defensive coordinator at Western Michigan last year. Western Michigan actually had a top 10 defense in the FBS. He was part of the Chargers under Harbaugh and worked under Jesse Minter in 2024. He was the safeties coach. So he's going to keep that same scheme. I would expect, just like Minter did with the Chargers, a lot of simulated pressures. And as mentioned earlier, simulated pressures where you're showing 6 or 7 men in the box, but you only blitz 4. Everybody else runs back to into coverage. So, yeah, that's the O'Leary defense. So the defensive system will be staying the same. My free agent fits here. So offensive line, I'm going to talk about here. This is my Tyler Linderbaum spot, Tom. Center, he's got elite lateral mobility. He fits McDaniel's zone blocking scheme that's going to be implemented. They have a lot of money to make it work, and I think this is where the big fish goes in free agency. I think Linderbaum ends up with the Chargers on the interior. You've got your first-round pick, Slater, and Joe Alt on the outside of him. Re-sign Zion Johnson, which you have the money to do so. Then you might have one more guard position that's open there, but I would feel much more comfortable going into the year with that offensive line with Justin Herbert operating behind it. And then as far as free agency, they kind of have a hole at safety. Derwin James, I think O'Leary's going to want to move Derwin James around the formation a lot, just like Jesse Minter did. Nick Cross, who's a free agent from the Colts, he's coming off like a career year. I think he's a guy who could provide reliable, deep safety help, and he has the speed and he has the range that the Chargers' defensive system covets. The Chargers are coming into this year, I think, this could be one of the teams that really, I mean, I know I may be getting ahead of myself a little bit. I like the way how they're currently situated. And if they make a couple of big moves in free agency, bringing in a Tyler Linderbaum off the offensive line, bringing in a Nick Cross at safety, I think this is a team that, I mean, technically they've kind of surpassed the Chiefs in a way, but they could definitely challenge the Broncos next year for that AFC West title. I like the way they're currently situated right now.
Yeah, I think the composite of this football team is really good, and much of it's going to come down to who they can retain. Like if they can retain Oweh, which I think that's the plan, they have the money to do it. I don't think pass rush becomes that big of a need, but you look at the rest of their defense, I like it. I like to shout on safety. Elijah Molden was really good last year and kind of took a step back this year. I think they could use another corner, depending on who they replace, but what this team looks like or doesn't look like and how they compete next season is going to come down to who they retain. If they can retain Oweh, I don't know if I'd retain Khalil Mack, at least not at the price that Spotrac has him valued at $18
That high?
million.
I can't
Yeah,
see that. Yeah.
again, it's Spotrac and they're good, but
Yeah.
I don't know about that. He had 5.5 sacks last year, so he wasn't great. Or I mean, you would take 5.5 sacks, but not at $18 million a season. So I'm curious if maybe they look to flip him out, but I think they need to keep Oweh. You took the question out of my mouth. I was going to ask you, if they get Tyler Linderbaum, would you re-sign Zion Johnson? Because
Mhm.
that's what I would do. If I can get
Absolutely.
Tyler Linderbaum and I can re-sign Zion Johnson, then I think that's a really solid core four guys, and then you have to figure out what you want to do at that other guard position. Trevor Panning hasn't really panned out, but maybe you give Trevor Panning another chance as a guard, or if not, you go to the draft and you find a guy you feel you can plug and play or sign a vet. Otherwise, you look at this offense. I love the quarterback. I think he does a lot with a little. Um, this line got killed this year, and you mentioned it. They were without both their starters for basically the entire season. I like their running back, who was also banged up this year. They have a good complementary at wide receiver. I do wonder if maybe this could be a team that looks to upgrade at wide receiver. It depends on what you feel about Quentin Johnston, who I liked out of college, but really hasn't hit the heights that I think people thought he would, maybe myself included. And I'm with you. I don't think Keenan Allen comes back next year unless he's okay with that third wide receiver position spot. So wide receiver could be like a sneaky need for this football team as well. Um, and then defensive tackle. I think if they can just help themselves rush the passer a little bit better, that would help. But to your point, a wide receiver, I'm curious to see who Mike McDaniel brings in and what he can do with Justin Herbert. This should be a team with the amount of cap space they have, and they've drafted pretty well, that they need to take the step next year. It's year 3 under Hardball. They've done well in those first 2 years, and now it's time for them to win a playoff game next year and see if they can find themselves in that AFC Championship game. Or when you find yourself in that game, anything can happen.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, the Chargers, I really like what they did this offseason, or what they've done so far, at least with the coaching. I think Mike McDaniels, I think that's an excellent hire for them. Bringing him in, I like that Harbaugh was willing to, you know what, I'm going to change up my style a little bit here too. I really like that. He's very, very open-minded here to try to change up the offense. He knew something wasn't working, and he's like, you know what, got a chance to bring in Mike McDaniel here. And I think I mean, I really like the way the Chargers are positioning themselves right now, coaching wise. I think they're gonna spend a lot in free agency. They're gonna be major players with the amount of cap room they have, and yeah, I think they're gonna go for it. I wouldn't be surprised if they're a team we're looking at it, in the Final Four at the end of next season.
And if we're talking about the AFC, right? You have the Broncos. You have maybe the Patriots,
Buffalo.
maybe Buffalo, depending on what happens there. Outside of those teams, who do you think looks great? I mean, Houston has a great defense. Do they have the quarterback?
Mhm.
That's $1 million question with them. If you're the Chargers, yeah, you lost in the first round this year. It's frustrating. You had a lot of things go against you. If your luck changes a little bit and you can add a little bit to your football team, I only think they need a lot. I think this is a team that at the start of the season we could be talking about as the second best team in the AFC.
Mhm. Yeah, dude, I'll be honest, coming into this year, man, I really like the Chargers making a jump up, and, I mean, I know they can't just had a really good year. I spoke about them earlier. Jacksonville, I really like too, depending
Yep.
on what
Yeah,
they
they're
do.
another one.
Yeah. So, alright, so that was the Chargers, so we'll flip over to the NFCs. This is gonna be your 4th team, right, that you were talking about. So let's see,
Yep.
we talk about Dallas. There's the Giants, get them off the right, Dallas, Giants, and Tampa. Okay, so
Yes, sir.
let's see who we end up with here. Oh, man, just staring at that thing, I'm like, "Ooh, Arizona or Washington?"
Ooh, give me Arizona. Arizona will be fun.
Oh, Washington. Yep,
Oh my
another NFC East.
goodness. We're talking about the entire NFC East today.
Dude, if you get the Eagles on the next one, I don't that would be funny.
Let me get to the Commanders in my note. All right, so summary on the Commanders. This was a disappointing year for the Commanders. 5-12 a year after making the NFC Championship. And Daniels struggled to stay healthy, and a defense that was a top half defense in 2024 absolutely fell off a cliff and finished as one of the worst units in football. They were a team that was super aggressive last offseason and last season. Between last year's trade deadline and the start of last season, Marshawn Lattimore, Javon Kinlaw, and Von Miller. And while some of them, Von Miller had 9 sacks, played well, none really moved the needle the way the Commanders wanted it to. So where do we start with the Commanders cap situation wise? They are under the cap and they have plenty of money to spend. We were just talking about the Chargers. They don't have as much as the Chargers, but they're in that category with the Cardinals. If they choose to free up any money, this is how they can do it. The Commanders gave up a ton. The first would be Laramie Tunzel. They gave up a ton to get him, but he was outstanding for them last year. And despite his age, the Commanders will probably look to extend him. His current cap hit is $24.95 million. That's what he carrying the next year. So I'm gonna venture to guess they'll either look to extend him or maybe they'll look to eat that money and then talk about an extension next year. Samuel Cosme played guard this year. They can convert his salary and free up another $12 million. They can always extend Tyler Biadasz, who played center for them, if they want to. So kind of some what can you do with players either to free up space or move them on. The first was Marcus Lattimore, who they cut. They cut Marcus Lattimore, I think today or yesterday. Finn, I don't know if you can look that up for me while I'm talking about that.
I believe he was cut today. I thought I saw.
Yeah, he was released. He was cut before March 15th. That frees him up $18.5 million. It just didn't work out. He'll be an interesting name when it comes to free agency. We haven't mentioned him much yet, in part because we didn't know if he was going to be available. But he's going to be a guy that he will get a chance probably on a contender to show what he can still do. It just did not work out in Washington. Deron Payne is another player, despite starting for the Commanders since he was drafted for them by them in 2018. Payne hasn't been able to hit the heights he did when he got his contract extension in 2022. He's heading into a contract year and he's covering a big cap hit. I'm assuming the Commanders are going to try to move on from him in some capacity. They'd free $16 million up if they can trade him before June 1st. So again, they're going to be looking for a team that thinks they can get the best out of him in a contract year and maybe get 1 year out of him, eat whatever that cap hit is. I don't know if they'll be able to move him, but they'll look to do that. And Nick Algretti, who started 17 games for them in 2024, only started 4 of 16 in 2025. They're probably going to cut him. I don't know if they have yet or not. They'll save around $3.6 million if they do that. So who are the Commanders' free agents? The first is Deebo Samuel. They traded for Samuel last March. He had an okay season for the Commanders. He finished with 727 receiving yards. It's the most he's had since 2023. But considering that Spotrac has him valued at $13.3 million, and he really didn't reach the heights I'm sure they hoped he was going to reach when they traded for him, I'm going to venture that the Commanders look to move on. And if they're looking to sign a wide receiver, look to just go in a completely different direction. The next is Bobby Wagner, who, despite his age, was absolutely outstanding for the Commanders this year. He was the best player on their defense. Word is he's looking to play again next year. I have to imagine Washington looks to retain him. He's valued at $7.5 million on Spotrac. He has that relationship with Dan Quinn from when he was in Seattle, when they played together and won Super Bowls together, and then they've reunited in Washington. I have to imagine he looks to stay in Washington, and retaining him shouldn't be a problem. Again, a player at his age that's still playing at an elite level. Von Miller's a free agent. He had 9 sacks, but he wasn't as productive as he was the year prior in Buffalo. His valuation on Spotrac is $6 million. I wouldn't be shocked if they look to move on from him, but at the right price, I could see him staying. I believe I've read he wants to stay. So if they can find a deal that works for all parties, I think they'd like to do that. Next is Chris Paul, one of their guards. He was a young guard who's been a really good pass blocker, but not a great run blocker. In fact, he graded really poorly as a run blocker. So they're going to have to weigh what they look to do with him. And the last is Marcus Mariota, or second to last is Marcus Mariota. I just mentioned him because I thought he played well for the Commanders when called in action, which was quite a bit this year. He's one that I think if you're a team that you look at some of these retread names and go, I don't want to take a shot on him as a starter, maybe Mariota. You give Mariota a contract that won't break the bank. You sign him to a 1 or 2 year deal on good terms, and then maybe give him a chance. Otherwise, he's a really solid starter, and I could see him staying in Washington if he doesn't have any starting options. And the last is Zach Ertz. Older, we don't know if he's going to play. Wasn't really productive. Had some good years for Washington, but I think they look to move on from them. So some of the targets on offense. I really think this team needs to look for a wide receiver. They to complement Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin is one of the most underrated wide receivers in football for me. And they have Terry McLaurin. They have Noah Brown, who's done well under Dan Quinn, a former Cowboy, came over from Dallas when Dan Quinn made the move there. Luke McCaffrey has been okay, probably not what they were hoping they would get for him as like a nickel guy who's banged up a little bit this year. I really think this team needs to go out and get a number two. They thought they had him in Deebo Samuel. I don't think he's the guy moving forward. So again, when you look at some of these names on this free agent list, could it be a Rashid Shaheed? Could it be maybe Tyreek Hill, depending on money? Wandell Robinson. I think that might be a little too high for them, depending on what they're looking for their number two or potentially three wide receiver. Could Mike Evans be an option for this football team, depending on price? But I really think tight end is where this team needs to get better. They had one of the worst tight end groups in football last year. They again tight end, and we haven't really talked about tight end free agent list yet. Like it's not a feast or famine, but it's like, do you take a risk on a Kyle Pitts, or do you hope a Travis Kelce or Dallas Goedert reach free agency? I think if either of those guys reached free agency, the Commanders maybe take a chance on those guys, or maybe even look at Pitts and go, we feel we can get the best out of them. And then interior line. This team needs a guard. They need to stabilize the line. They need to figure out what they have in Jaden Daniels. And I'm going to go on my Jaden Daniels spiel in a minute. Sam Cosby's been okay. Chris Paul, as I mentioned, was good against the pass, struggled against the run. He could be a guy they look to bring back with Josh Conley Jr., who was their young tackle, and Laramie Tunzel. I think odds are with the money they have, they look to go out and sign a more proven, well-rounded guard next year, and maybe even one of those vets we talked about. And then on the defensive side of the football, this team needs a pass rusher. Dorrance Armstrong got hurt last year. Javon Kinlaw they brought over was good. I like Jazion Newton out of college. He hasn't been great for them. They have Preston Smith, who hasn't been the guy. This team needs a pass rusher. They need to find a way. I think that's where their money's going to go. I think Travion Hendrickson is a guy that they're going to be all over. I've heard Max Crosby's name mentioned with him. They could be a team who gives up what is needed to get him. They've been a team that's been flashy with moves. Linebacker, Frank Louvu hasn't been great. Jordan McGee's young. If Bobby Wagner leaves, this team absolutely needs a linebacker. If they can retain Wagner, then it's probably a matter of getting a guy who can play with him and then trying to find a young guy. Maybe it's Jordan McGee, who's young, who can play next to him. And then in the secondary, I think this team really needs help at safety and corner. Again, they have money. They're going to be in for all those corners that we've mentioned. And then at safety, when you look at the safety market, maybe it's Kobe Bryant from Seattle. Maybe it's Brian Cook. Cameron Curl had a really good year for St. Louis. Could it be one of those Chicago guys, depending on what they're looking for, Jaquan Brisker or Kevin Bird? But this is going to be a team who has money in free agency, and it's how they've done it, and they're going to look to spend it. And to me, at the end of the day, this football team needs to put a team, or at least an offense, around Jaden Daniels so that they can figure out what they're going to do with Jaden Daniels. I know that sounds absurd, but Jaden Daniels will be in year 3 last year. In year 1, he made the NFC Championship game. In year 2, he barely played. And we've seen what happens when teams think they have the guy and he's not the guy. CJ Stroud, or potentially might not be the guy. Washington needs to know what they're going to do with him. They need to know if they're going to pick up the 5th-year option. Again, it sounds insane, but there's a world where he plays poorly next year or he gets hurt again that Washington has to go, are we getting ready to pay this guy 40, 50, maybe resetting the quarterback market money? Or are we picking up this 5th-year option and seeing what he is? Or are we looking to prep for whoever the quarterback is? I know it's absurd. I know any Washington fan who hears this is going to laugh, but there's a world where you look at Jaden Daniels a year from now and you go, he played 8 games last year. We still don't know what he is. Is picking up the 5th-year option a debate?
It's basically it's almost like RG3 all over again for them.
Yeah, RG3 is interesting, not to cut you off, because like, I've seen that comparison. I don't wanna put that on the kid because I don't think his injuries are anywhere near what RG3's were,
Mhm.
but I look at him more as like a CJ Stroud case where it's like, after that first year for CJ Stroud, everybody was like, "Here he is. Here's the next good young quarterback. We're set." And now we're a year what with CJ Stroud, and we're hearing Houston's talking about trading this guy. Like, Jaden Daniels could very well be that. But yeah, it RG3, it makes sense that that comes to the mind of Washington fans.
Yeah, great. I mean, it is almost the same situation, just in terms of like, right. I mean, second overall pick, had a great rookie season, and then injuries just kind of took over. And I tell you, Washington, for a team that made the NFC title game, what, 2 seasons ago, they have a lot of needs. I don't want to say that it was a. I mean, they really caught lightning in a bottle that first year with Daniels and Dan Quinn. They made that run. They beat the Lions in Detroit, and then I mean, I think reality set in when the Eagles smashed them in the NFC title game that year. And then, going into last year, I mean, they really are a team with a lot of needs. I can't agree more with, pass rusher, especially Von Miller, I think led them in sacks last year, and he's like 37 years old. Durant Armstrong's a pretty solid player, but, he's coming off a major knee injury. And like you just said, I mean, they cut Marshawn Lattimore today. They really need a lot of help in the secondary. And there's outside of Terry McLaurin, there's not much really around Jaden Daniels. I mean, I think there'll be players, they have money. Are they players for Trey Hendrickson, who's going to be the number one option on
Yeah,
the market? I mean,
that's what
right,
I
coming
think.
off a shortened season, he was hurt this year, but in games that he played last year, he was very good. Maybe a guy like Jalen Phillips off the edge, provides a good blend of speed to power. You've got Arnold Ebiketie out there, Boye Mafe, Kingsley Anabare. There are options out there. Washington's got to add to that pass rush either way. As far as weapons go for Jaden Daniels, I think this could actually be a Mike Evans spot. He's 32. We talked about him earlier. He's also 6'5". I could see him just being like a dominant red zone target for Daniels. Just throw the ball up to Mike Evans in the red zone. He'll go up and get it. And then you mentioned running back too. I mean, I don't know if they want to spend. I don't know if he's going to hit free agency or not, but I think Kenneth Walker would be a great physical runner here for them to have. Maybe even Tyler Algier here to join with who's the running back? Crockett, right? In the
Yeah,
backfield there. So
Krosky Merritt.
Krosky Merrick, that's what I'm thinking of. But yeah, man, for a team that NFC title run 2 years ago, they really, I feel like they did like kind of peak kind of early. And like I said, I don't want to say it was a fluky run, but they did get hot when they needed to, right? They won the play. I think they beat Tampa in the first round, then they beat Detroit, and then they just ran into a good Eagles team. But yeah, definitely a team that needs to really build around Jaden Daniels, and hopefully he stays healthy and he's able to play close to a full season next year.
Yeah, I think this was a team that 2 years ago was really not carried by their defense, but their defense was better than average.
Mhm.
This defense last year was one of the worst defenses in football, and they have a lot of holes. So I understand that Commander fans may feel they're 2 or 3 players, and who knows? They have I don't let's see if I they have like $76 million, and that was before they released Marshawn Lattimore. So they can add pieces. For me, what how this team comes and goes is gonna come down to the quarterback, and part of the defensive woes were the fact that their offense was awful this year, but they need to add bodies on defense, caliber football players, and they need to make sure they can keep their quarterback healthy next year.
And so we'll move on Washington. So that we're going back to the AFC here. So let's see. So we'll make sure Jets, Jags, Broncos, Chargers. That's what I spoke about. All right. So this is my last team of the night as we approach. Let's see. The chances of me getting another good team, right? I've had the Chargers, Jaguars, and Denver. Let's see who am I going to end up with here. Oh, here we go. Give
Oh,
it to me. Give it to me.
let's ooh.
Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City. Talk about God. I don't want to say fall back to reality, but
End of an era.
you know what? It very
That's what
well
it
could
feels
be.
like, right?
It feels like it was just with how they were last year. I mentioned Matt Nagy a little earlier. We're talking about the Giants, so let's see. Let me get to my Chiefs notes here. Where are they here? L, right? K comes before L, right? If I know my alphabet.
Yes, you're good there.
Yep. So let's see. Kansas City, Kansas City. Okay, Kansas City Chiefs, right? So 3 straight trips to the Super Bowl. Chiefs take a big step back this past year, going 6-11. So this is actually the first time they missed the playoffs since the 2014 season. Man, that's quite a run over a decade straight of making the playoffs. So they got off to a rough start, but at one point they were 5-3 in the season, entering in November, and then they just completely fell apart. They lost 8 of their last 9. So I will say this: the defense did actually finish as a top 10 unit this year. They were 6th in scoring, only allowing about 19 points per game, and they were 12th against the pass. The defense kept the Chiefs in most games, and it was really the offense that ranked 21st in scoring that really brought the whole team down. So before Mahomes got hurt, he did throw for 3,500 yards and 22 touchdowns, but he also threw for 11 interceptions. The Chiefs this year were 1-7 on the road, which is very, from what we think of past years, very un-Chiefs like, very uncharacteristic to how they had played in the past. So just a couple positives. Creed Humphrey was named first team All Pro. He is widely considered as the best center in the league. I know we spoke a lot about Tyler Linderbaum tonight, but Creed Humphrey is a guy who's outside of maybe Linderbaum. Creed Humphrey is probably the number 1 center in the league. And then Chris Jones, he was still a solid player this past year on that defensive line. He had 7 sacks, 2 passes defended. He was still making plays out there. Of course, there was that famous play on the Monday night game against Jaguars where he thought Trevor Lawrence was down and he kind of stopped playing. That kind of became a meme for him during the season, but all things considered, he did play pretty well this year. So, free agency. The Chiefs' cap situation is absolutely horrible heading into the season. They're currently projected, well, I shouldn't say currently, because they actually just restructured Mahomes' contract. They were at the time projected to have they were supposed to be $58 million over the cap, and they had 27 impending free agents. So Brett Veach really has his work cut out for him as the general manager here. They just restructured Mahomes' contract this week, which saved $43.6 million against the cap. And then, this is actually the 4th straight season the Chiefs have actually had to restructure Mahomes' contract. So there's a lot of money that's been moving around here over the past couple of years. Their major free agents, though, heading into the year, Brian Cook, a safety. He's coming off a breakout season. He started all 17 games, recorded 85 tackles, 6 pass breakups. PFF actually had him ranked as a number 4 best overall safety this season. Very strong in run defense, very solid in coverage. He's projected to receive a contract potentially in like that $14 to $15 million a year range. And I'm not sure if the Chiefs are going to be able to afford him based on their current situation here. Jalen Watson, who we spoke about a little earlier at corner, he's established himself as a really reliable corner. He's coming off a season, though. He had a groin injury that occurred week 12 that ended his season. He still finished the season with 42 tackles and 2 picks. There's also a lot of discussions about Trent McDuffie's future being the subject of potential trade rumors. So, I mean, if there's any way the Chiefs could actually extend Jalen Watson, that could be pivotal for some stability on the back end of the defense. Another guy out there, Isaiah Pacheco, he's coming off a really down season. He's been beat up, a lot of injuries over the past couple of years. It really affected his play this year, and I fully expect him to be gone after the season. Leo Chanel, who I mentioned a little earlier on the defensive side of the ball, linebacker, pretty solid linebacker, maybe nothing special in some folks' eyes, but he played in 14 games last season, 58 tackles, 2 sacks to add to that. He could be maybe one of the cheaper options on the market there. And then, of course, people, Travis Kelce, right? I mean, there's a debate about whether he's going to retire at the age of 36 and if he's a lock to be, he is a lock to be a Hall of Famer, but unsure of what the future is for him. I mean, Chiefs should probably look into maybe another free agent tight end maybe on the market this year. I know they have a couple guys who I think they like on the behind them on the depth chart, but there's no really long-term solution there currently. So let's kind of talk about the coaching now before we get into their plans for free agency. So Andy Reid, right, head coach, and he calls the offensive plays. He runs a version of the West Coast offense that prioritizes precision and adaptability. So since coming to the Chiefs, he's implemented some more college spread formations and RPOs. He's classically used a lot of short, high percentage horizontal passes, so like slants, screens, flat routes, stuff like that. And those are designed to pull defenders out of position. And you're eventually setting up a deep shot play once he feels the secondary is lulled into cheating up and trying to protect against the short game. So he prioritizes versatile athletic offensive linemen who can move in space, setting up screens and shovel passes. There's been some folks reporting that he actually might be shifting away from that this current season for more of a shotgun heavy approach. I mean, this might be able to create more play action opportunities. Mahomes, right, coming off the ACL, maybe the idea is they don't want him going under center so much, so maybe giving him more room to operate out of the shotgun formation. They did bring back Eric Bieniemy this year to be the offensive coordinator. They let go of Matt Nagy, under Bieniemy, the Chiefs' strength has really been power running, which Reed will likely lean on this season with Mahomes coming back from the injury. Let's talk about defense. So Steve Spagnuolo is the defensive coordinator there. He prioritizes like a multiple blitz system. Uses a lot of pre-snap disguise and aggressiveness based upon the situation. He doesn't just blitz with linebackers. The Chiefs like to blitz corners, they'll blitz safeties. They want to try to force quarterbacks into hurry throws. And he likes to have a heavy defensive package, often playing with, like, sometimes the Chiefs will have 6 defensive backs out on the field. He also likes to use like simulated pressures, like I said earlier. So you walk up 7 or 8 players to the line of scrimmage, and you only end up sending 4 while the other 3 or 4 drop back into coverage. So the Chiefs defense, give Spags a lot of credit here. They had to adapt a lot last season because, right, the offense was struggling a lot last season. So the Chiefs, basically what the Chiefs defense did was they bracketed a lot more coverage to try to take away the offense's best playmaker to compensate for the lack of sack production that they had last year. But again, they had to compensate with how poorly the offense operated. So we'll talk about some free agents right now. Again, like as I mentioned earlier, it's going to be really tough for the Chiefs to really sign anybody really notable here with the cap situation being as it is. Of course, right? Tyreek Hill just got traded this week. A lot of people are going to say, oh, maybe Tyreek Hill might end up going back to the Chiefs. Maybe he'll even give him a discount to go back there and maybe try to chase a ring again. For personally, I don't think this Chiefs roster is even ready to contend yet, but looking where they're sitting right now. But they need to restructure, not just Mahomes. I think they should look into restructuring Chris Jones too to try to open up some more space. One guy I think who makes sense for the Chiefs, and this is especially if Travis Kelce decides not to come back. We mentioned him a little bit earlier when we talked about Tampa Bay. Cade Otton from Tampa, I think he'd be a really nice, reliable weapon for Mahomes in the middle of the field. And I don't think he's going to cost that much either. So I'd look to maybe sign someone like him, maybe on a cheaper option if Kelce does decide to hang it up. And who knows, maybe you could even sign Otton to like a 2-year deal, and maybe when Kelce finishes out this year, if he decides to play, then you have Otton locked in for the following season. And then while you're still looking for your long-term option at the position. Another free agent fit here, I don't see this happen at all, but at safety, if Brian Cook were to leave, I like Cameron Curl from the Rams, really versatile player. He can play effectively in the box. He can play deep coverage, but again, I just don't see any way the Chiefs are going to be able to afford him with the salary cap situation looking the way it is. As far as the Chiefs go, of course, they have a high draft pick. I think they're at, oh, man, I think, what are they, like 8, Tom? I
I'll
don't,
look it up while you're talking.
yeah, I don't know if they're 8 or 10, something like that. They have a very, um, or maybe 9 it was. They have a very high top pick, which I believe, I honestly think they're going to have to go offense with that pick. So I know last week we talked about Jeremiah Love a little.
Number 9.
Number 9. Okay. So actually, after I did research on the Chiefs, not only would Jeremiah Love make a lot of sense to me, dude, if there's any way Caleb Down falls here, I think the Chiefs could
Hey,
pounce on
hey,
him too.
hey, quiet, quiet, quiet. There's no value in the safety position. You just said it yourself. We're good.
But yeah, the Chiefs, man, it's a really messy situation there. And just until they can get cap compliant, I can't really see a way for them to really improve the team as quickly as they can via free agency, unless I don't know, maybe they bring in another running back to take pressure off Mahomes early in the year. I think I don't know. I don't know if Gardner Minshew's under contract still there or not. Remember, he was the backup last year. I probably should have looked further into that, but they'll probably either way. Mahomes might not be ready to start the year, so they're gonna.
Minshew is on a 1-year deal.
Okay, so that was last year, so he's a free agent
Correct.
now himself here.
Correct.
Yeah, backup quarterback might be. I mean, you mentioned Marcus Mariota earlier from Washington. I mean, if Mariota
Yeah.
sees maybe an
Yeah.
opportunity here to start, a couple games early in the year
And
while
Randy
Mahomes
Reed.
is, working to get healthy, I think that could be a spot for him. But yeah, the Chiefs will definitely need to invest in a backup quarterback here to possibly hold the fort for Mahomes if he's not healthy to start the season.
Yeah, the salary stuff is concerning, but they do have a number of ways to free up space. They did the Mahomes trigger, which they had to. They freed up $43 million doing that. They're gonna, although it may not be the smartest because he's a bit older now, and who knows how much longer he's gonna play. You know, he's 31. He'll be 32 at the start of the year, and he's got 2 years left on his deal. But they're gonna convert Chris Jones's
Mhm.
full salary from 2026 to a bonus. They're going to free up $27 million there. They'll probably do it with Trey Smith, the guard, Nick Bolton, the linebacker, Creed Humphreys, all guys who will be around. Although Bolton's getting up there, so they can free up. You know, just looking at it here, 43. Yeah, it's another 70 plus another. They can free up close to $100 million if they choose to. You know,
Mhm.
I'm not saying they're going to do all these triggers. They can make money work. And then it comes like they're going to cut Jawan Taylor, the right tackle. He was not what they wanted this year. They signed him to a pretty big deal. They're going to eat that dead money. They're going to cut him up and they're going to cut him up. Jesus. They're going to they're not going to do that, everybody. They're going to cut him and free up about $20 million. And they have some other things that they can do. Um, I hope they don't sign Tyreek Hill. The Eric Bieniemy thing already feels like a let's run the band back thing when nobody wants to hear the band come back together, and Tyreek Hill would scream, let's do that. This football team needs to get younger in a number of areas.
Mhm.
And if they can do that via free agency, if they can do that through the draft, however it is, they need to do it. This team has a number of contributors in their, 30s or late 20s. So they need to figure out a way to make this team younger. And again, keep Patrick Mahomes kind of in the back of their mind. The goal is that he's going to be here for a little bit longer. How can we build this team and keep it so that even when there's a transition, we are still competitive in that regard? I think this team needs to find a right tackle.
Mhm.
That needs to be one of their priorities. They tried the Jawan Taylor thing. It did not work. I think they're going to release, maybe they don't, maybe they keep him and let him run it back a second year. I think they're going to look to release him and save that $20 million so you don't have to maneuver with some of these contracts. And then, yeah, I mean, this is a team that for a really long time on offense has got it done with guys that I don't think you or I would consider are like elite top guys in the NFL.
Right.
Like Rashid Rice had going on what he had going on. Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, Isaiah Pacheco, Kareem Hunt. They have Kelsey, who's like a number one option. But this football team needs to go out and get Mahomes legitimate weapons. And I don't know if that'll be via the draft. I don't know if it's Jeremiah Love at that spot or if it's maybe whoever you if it's one of those two I mean, if Cardinal Tate's there, I'm sure it will be Tate, but I don't
Mhm.
think he'll get there. But maybe it's one of those other two guys. I watched Malachi Lemon and I really, really like him. And watching him play with Patrick Mahomes would be a lot of fun. But I wouldn't be shocked if they free up money and if they try to go after a wide receiver. If it's Tyreek Hill, maybe it's Jawan Jennings. This is a spot that George Pickens' name has been thrown
Mhm.
around a little bit because they can free up the money and trade for him. And maybe they give up a day two pick that's, a high day two pick that would intrigue Dallas. I'd like to see them add stuff on the offensive side of the football. Of course, if Kelsey retires, tight end will be in it, will be a spot where you look to shore up this offense. Even if they keep him, I'm with you, Finn. I think they need to start looking for the future. If that's K. Dotton, awesome. If it's a rookie tight end, awesome. And then again, Jalen Watson is probably, outside of Kelsey, of course, maybe their most important free agent.
Mhm.
If they can't keep him, they're going to need to replace him. And as you mentioned, that safety room, Brian Cook is going to hit free agency. If they can't keep these two guys, those are two positions that become musts. They
Mhm.
need to find a way to replace guys. And even if they find a way to retain both, you're looking for them to get safeties to help complement them. They wouldn't be shopping in the top end of the category at that point, but you look to find a way to shore up that secondary.
Mhm. Absolutely. All right, those were the Chiefs. So this is going to be our last team of the night. It's on Tom for the NFC. Let's see. Giant. We spoke about
Everybody in the NFC
Washington.
East except the Eagles.
Look at this. Yeah, you got three teams in the NFC. Who was the other team? And Tampa. So let's see. Who's our prediction going to be?
And I've had the most fun talking about Tampa.
There's no chance. Okay, you passed the Eagles. It won't be NFC East. Oh, okay.
Whoa.
Going for the revenge.
Give me the Vikings.
He wants the bites.
Yeah, the Vikings will be good. Let me just get my notes here. All right, Minnesota. Okay, so the Vikings. I will start. I'll start with my summary. The Vikings, 9-8, which isn't awful when you consider the division they were in. They were another team that dealt with a bunch of injuries, and their defense was one of the better defenses in all of football. The QB play was not great, and that's what we'll talk about probably the majority of this time with the Vikings. JJ McCarthy was kind of given the keys to the kingdom. He played 10 games. He threw for 1,600 yards in those 10 games. He threw for more interceptions than he did touchdowns. So this offseason about building around McCarthy? Or is it finding someone to compete with McCarthy? They bring back Kevin O'Connell, who I think is one of the best coaches in football. They have Brian Flores, who's back. He's re-signed with them as well. He was a free agent. So they have the majority of their coaching staff back. The issue for the Vikings are they are over the salary cap. Um, they are going to have to make some moves in order to get themselves under the salary cap. One of the moves they can make is by extending second round pick Brian O'Neill, who they drafted out of Pittsburgh. He has a $23.2 million cap hit this upcoming season. The Vikings can look to extend him and kind of kick that money further down. He intends to be there. He had a pretty solid year for them. They have a bunch of restructure options, which they're going to have to probably do the majority of these because they don't have a ton of options to free up space anyway. The first is Justin Jefferson. They can convert his salary to a bonus, free up almost $20 million. Christian Darrisaw, their outstanding left tackle, they can convert his salary, free up $11 million. Jonathan Allen at defensive tackle, who's been good, not great for them. They can convert his salary for up $12 million. And then TJ Hawkinson, they can look to extend him. He's like a fringe extension guy. He's been really good for them. Or if they're not fully convinced on that yet, they can convert his bonus and free up almost $12 million that way. So I think they're around $40 million over the cap. Those moves will get them close to, if not under the cap. And then they have a couple guys they can figure out what they want to do with. The first is Aaron Jones. In the last year of his contract, he missed a good chunk of 25. They can free up $6 million if they cut him after the start of the league year. They can free up $8 million if they do it before the league year starts. So I believe the league year starts March 13th. If they cut him before that, they can save $8 million. If they cut him after, it's $6 million. He was banged up last year. They have Jordan Mason, who I think they like. So I don't. He hasn't been bad, but I don't expect the Vikings to hang on to him. Javon Hargrave, still a solid defensive tackle. I'm sure the Vikings are going to look to trade him. They can save a good amount of money if they trade him for about $15 million if they can find a trade partner for him. They can release him before June 1st, so after the start of the new year, but designate him a June 1st cut and free up $11 million. And Blake Cashman, they will probably release him for or they could release him for $4.4 million, but he's still a really good linebacker, so I don't expect to see them do that. The Vikings free agents. There aren't really many. Harrison Smith is the big one. The big question with Harrison Smith is he going to retire? There's a lot of people that cover the Vikings that when you read, they think that the Vikings are going to, or they think that Harrison Smith is going to retire. If he does, safety becomes a need right away for this football team. If he doesn't, I think they'd like to try to keep him. Their cap situation, if we're going to talk about bad cap situations, is bad. He'd probably have to take a discount in order to keep him. He might do that to stay in Minnesota. I think ultimately he retires and safety just becomes a need in general. Next is Jalen Naylor. I think they let him go. He's got a $5 million cap value on Spot Track. They might keep him because him and McCarthy had a pretty good rapport this year. He just wasn't that productive. And the last is Eric Wilson, who they signed on a one-year deal. He was very productive for their defense, had a career-high 6.5 sacks, was second on the team in tackles, had 4 forced fumbles. He's one I think they'd like to keep if they can keep him. He did sign on a one-year deal and outperformed his contract, but he's valued at $4.2 million on Spot Track. I think he'll get a little bit more than that. And if he does, I don't even know if the Vikings can make that work. If they can, they'll absolutely look to retain him. So when it comes to needs for the Vikings. The first need is quarterback. We'll probably take a little bit of time and talk about this. Uh, the big question for the Vikings is JJ McCarthy the guy? Should Kevin O'Connell give him another season? He was banged up last year. He didn't look great, but can they stabilize around him? And the Vikings had, they have weapons on offense. Their offensive line is not awful. So should they run it back with JJ McCarthy, or will they go the route of finding a veteran quarterback, or maybe even trade for a Mac Jones, find somebody that can compete with JJ McCarthy this upcoming season? I just mentioned Mac Jones. You've heard Kirk Cousins' name mentioned a little bit with this football team, so that could be a route they go in terms of at least covering themselves at the quarterback position. Whereas McCarthy, who missed his entire first year because of an injury, this is year two. We talk about fifth-year options. They need to figure out if they're going to exercise that a year from now, or if they're going to be in the quarterback business, during next year's draft with all the potential options. They really need to figure out what they're doing with him this season. So quarterback is I put a need with like a question mark. Next to me would be defensive tackle. They still have Javon Hargrave. They still have Jonathan Allen. But I think they'd like to add someone to complement those two, especially when you look at everything that is behind them in terms of it's a bunch of undrafted day 3 guys that they added. It looks like they're going to move on from Javon Hargrave at some point. So you have Jalen Redmond, you have Jonathan Allen. Then it's just a matter of finding a guy that can complement those two in there. Corner's probably the next need. Isaiah Rodgers was really good in 25. Byron Murphy Jr. took a step back. Theo Jackson had a good 25. Can they add another corner, which gives them the ability to kind of move Theo Jackson around, which is what they like to do with the defense this year? So I think corner's going to be a position that they look to add. And safety. Whether Harrison Smith comes back or not, this team needs another safety. As I just mentioned, they played Theo Jackson there a little bit, so maybe they look to move Theo Jackson there full-time at safety, and then they look to add a nickel corner, which would be easier to move, which would be easier to look for. But if Harrison Smith retires, this team needs to find at least one more safety. They have a good amount of draft picks coming up, and they've drafted fairly well. They're not a team that you feel is super far away from making the playoffs. They went 9-8 this year. The big question for this team is going to come down to quarterback play. If JJ McCarthy is good, I think this is a playoff team next year. If JJ McCarthy struggles, they need to find a player that can come in here and help this team win football games.
Yeah, the Vikings, they took a lot of heat for letting Sam Darnold go, and what ended up happening, and he took Seattle to the Super Bowl there, and they won. So, right, I mean, they had a quarterback, and they chose, hey, we're gonna move on here. JJ's our guy, and then, we saw how the season went for JJ McCarthy. Yeah, I mean, we can talk a lot about quarterback. I mean, I think you mentioned right, they're gonna have to, they might have to free up some more cap space. So if they're interested at all, looking into I mean, Tua Tagovailoa or Kyler Murray, which I don't really see that for this team. Yeah, I mean, well, I'm curious to see. They're one of the more interesting teams hitting free agency because we don't know, what their plan is going to be at quarterback.
I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, their secondary needs some work. Harrison Smith, shout out Notre Dame fighting Irish. Future is being uncertain. He just completed his 14th season. And this past year, you mentioned him, Theo Jackson. He was a little inconsistent last year in the back end. So was Josh Metellus, another guy in their secondary. And at corner, they really don't have too much behind Byron Murphy over there. So yeah, definitely a position that they need to add to. I think even in our mock draft, I think I had them taking one of the corners. So offensive line, I was looking at that too. Ryan Kelly's their center. He's a veteran. He did have 3 concussions though during the season.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's a concern.
yeah, I don't know what his future might be. It might be potentially up in the air. And I know
He
you
was
mentioned
good though.
you mentioned Aaron Jones too. He's got a high cap hit this year. I mean, the Vikings really, need to find an answer to their, the future. Find an answer to the future at the running back position there. Free agent fits. I had Cordell Flott here from the Giants. So he's a big corner. He's considered a read and react corner who Brian Flores really likes for in his in his zone coverage schemes. If they are able to clear up some cap room, I was thinking maybe Shavarius Ward, if they cleared enough space, maybe he could be like a splash signing. He's an elite man coverage guy. And then if they do need to replace a guy like Ryan Kelly, there are some centers in free agency. Luke Fortner from the Saints, he showed some pretty significant improvement from this past
Yeah,
season. He
yeah,
could
he
be a
was good.
cost-effective guy. And then Ted Karras, too, from the Bengals could be another veteran option who could work with JJ McCarthy or whoever is under center. But yeah, man, big question is who is going to play quarterback next year? Are they going to bring in someone to just kind of replace JJ at the quarterback position, or are they going to bring in a vet to maybe battle it out with him? I know, right? There was a bunch of rumors from a certain quarterback who's over 40 years old who just played with Steelers last year. Is he maybe interested in maybe not going back to the Steelers, dealing with Mike McCarthy? Maybe he wants to go play for the Vikings like there were rumors about. I mean, I will say, dude, I mean, 9-8 season for the Vikings, considering the situation, their quarterback situation, because right after JJ McCarthy, they had nothing, right, at
Carson,
quarterback
well,
there.
well, Carson Wentz. Okay, here's the
God.
here. Well, you laugh, but here's the funny thing. Ready? I'll read you the stats because when I was looking through the Vikings, this is glaring. JJ McCarthy played 10 games. He threw for 1,600 yards, threw 11 touchdowns, 12 picks. Carson Wentz played 5 games, threw for 1,200 yards, 6 touchdowns, 5 picks. Carson Wentz was arguably more serviceable in this offense than JJ McCarthy was.
Yeah, he was, and look, I mean, we know Carson Wentz's track record, right? It speaks for itself. He had a
Yeah,
couple good years in Philly, and he kind of just fell off though pretty quickly after that. But yeah, I mean, I was gonna say like just the job that Kevin O'Connell was able to do last year, dealing with that quarterback room, and it seems like it feels like the fault wasn't really on him. The GM's the one who kind of bit the bullet here. They got rid
yes.
of him. I'm assuming maybe he made the call to go forward with McCarthy
Every
and send out Sam Darnold.
everything you read makes it sound like the McCarthy stuff was driven by the GM.
Mhm.
So, and I just want to say this about this football team, where when we mention teams like who we've spoken about today, like the Cowboys and the Chiefs, who are severely over the cap, they do have ways to free up a lot of money. The Vikings don't really have the ability to free up a lot of money. They're going to get themselves under the cap and they're going to be able to talk about what they want to do. I don't think this team is going to be very active in free agency at all. I think they're outside of quarterback. And when it comes to Kyler Murray or Tua Tagovailoa, they can't trade for these guys.
Mhm.
Like we'll talk about Kyler Murray, and I'm sure you'll talk about Tua when he comes to Miami. Whenever we get to those teams, but those contracts are basically untradeable. So yeah, if Kyler gets cut, I could see Kyler being an option for Minnesota. I think Kirk Cousins will be the guy if and when he gets cut. We didn't talk about Atlanta today. When we talk about Atlanta, by then Cousins may already be cut. It's probably coming soon. I think Cousins could make sense for a team like this where he feels he can go. He has a history with the football team. He knows if he plays average, this could be a team that makes the playoffs, and they're not losing a lot, and they've drafted pretty well. So if you're a Viking fan, it's just a matter of can we find the quarterback that can just be good. They don't have to be great. We saw it this year with Sam Darnold. You mentioned Sam Darnold. I didn't for a reason. They want to upset Viking fans. But if they can find a Sam Darnold type player, then yeah, this team could compete to not only make the playoffs, but maybe win a game and find themselves in the NFC Championship next year. But they need much better play from the quarterback position, and they really need better play from the running back position too.
Mhm.
But Jordan Mason, I know they're comfortable with. So really, if they can get a quarterback that can be good, they'll have a chance.
Mhm. All right. So we went through the first 10 teams on our free agency preview here on Loft Sports. We're just crossing over the 2.5 hour mark. This is one of those great pods. You fire up, you maybe take a road trip somewhere, go out with your buddies for the day, maybe take your girlfriend on a nice weekend getaway. This is one of those pods you fire up and just, listen to some NFL pre-free agency talk. So thanks everybody for joining with us today. We'll be back next week to talk about the next 10 teams. Of course, for the Loft Sports podcasts, check out our website at loftsportus.com. Follow us on X, YouTube, and TikTok at Loft Sports USA. Everybody have a good weekend. Enjoy this upcoming Sunday morning. Make sure to get up early. You've got
8
U.S. versus
a.m.
Canada, 8 a.m.
8
United
a.m.
States versus Canada in the gold medal game. We just saw the U.S. dominate today, Slovakia.
All right,
Check it out and
you want the
hope.
prediction?
What was that, Tom?
You want the prediction?
What's the prediction?
The US wins this game comfortably. They are a better hockey team than Canada.
They
They have
are,
a
and you
better
know what? They should have won there were a couple
Yeah.
guys that were banged up when they faced
Yep.
them in the, right in the at the break last year in the
Yep.
tournament, so I
4
think
Nations.
Canada caught a break there. Also, what's Crosby's status? I don't even know if he's gonna be playing.
He's gonna skate tomorrow. I think he's gonna play. Don't forget in that 4 Nations Rangers, Jesus, we'll talk about them eventually. The US were without their 2 best defensemen, or one in Quinn Hughes and arguably their best all-around defenseman in Charlie McAvoy, and Matthew Tkachuk was banged up. This team is healthy. They have the better defense. They have the better goalie. They're the deeper hockey team. I'm making the prediction now. They roll Canada to a gold medal on Sunday.
I would love to see that, as would our, I think the rest of our American,
Yes,
countrymen.
sir. Yes,
Alright.
sir. Play
Alright.
Freebird.
Later, guys. Everybody have a good night. Signing
See
off.
ya.